Hi, I'm Todd Nauck. Welcome to my YouTube channel. So for today's art video, I got a chance to be interviewed by Adventures in Poor Tastes, Chris Hassan, for the feature X-MenMonday. A link to that interview is in the video description below. So Chris came up with the idea of, what if we created an X-Men commission style piece of art based on audience interaction? So Chris came up with these three polls. All right, so here's the first tweet poll, Chris gave the fans a selection of characters. We had Nightcrawler, Jean Grey, Havoc, and Storm. And the Storm fans came out in force. Next up was the location. Where do we want to put our X character? We had Krakoa Island, which took the lead and held it, Atlantis, space, and the Savage Land. Then finally, we needed to know a certain item from the Marvel Universe for the fans to vote on. And we had the Infinity Gauntlet, the Soulsword, web shooters, and Thor's hammer. Okay, so now I have this information from these three polls. I know my character, I know my location, and I know my object. And so I can tap into my experience as a fan of reading so many X-Men stories to create this image. Taking what I know of Storm, what I know of Krakoa Island, and what I know of the Soulsword to create something new and get really creative with it. So it was so much fun, and I can't wait for you to watch what I came up with. So just doing the line art here. It's a penciling and inking stage. It's a bit of a long video, so get yourself a delicious snack, a tasty beverage, or maybe you want to grab your art tools and draw along. It's cool either way. I will share my tips and tricks, and I also answer some questions that I took on Instagram to add to the commentary here. So we have a lot to talk about and a lot to show in the art. So without further ado, here is Storm with a Soulsword on Krakoa Island. All right, so here we go. I have a 9-inch by 12-inch piece of smooth Strathmore Bristol board that I'm drawing on, and I'm using an art pencil here with an HB lead. I believe most any art pencil brand is going to be of similar quality. I'm using a Kimberly brand here. It's just a brand I found at the art store. I really had no preference, so I just grabbed it. The main thing for me is I wanted an HB lead. HB lead is not too hard and not too soft. The B means the lead is soft, H means the lead is hard. The greater the number next to that letter means the more intense hardness or softness of that lead. So a 2B is a little softer of a lead than the HB, and then that moves all the way up to 6B is the softest lead. It's very dark, very, very smudgy. An H lead, if you go up to a 2H, that's a little harder than an HB, and then if you go all the way up to a 6H, that's the hardest the lead can be. So it's going to come across as very light, almost like chiseling into the paper from my experience. So I don't like using too hard of a lead, and I don't like using too soft of a lead, because too hard of a lead creates too deep of a groove for my style of drawing. So when I go to ink, it can affect my inks. Too soft of a lead can be too waxy. There's this film of graphite now on the paper that the ink is unable to absorb past that 6B softness of graphite on the paper. So when I go to erase, the ink is sitting on top of the graphite rather than absorbing into the paper. So it's a greater chance of it smudging and smearing all throughout the art piece, whether I'm drawing it or going to erase the pencil lines. And then oftentimes with that 6B, the lines are so dark that it can get so smudgy that it's almost impossible to really erase it off of the paper. So that's not really the right tool for penciling comics or commission pieces like this. So that's why I like the HB, and a lot of professional comic book artists that I know feel the same way. They are HB people as well. Not exclusively HB, but a lot of artists I know like to use the HB for that reason. It's just the right shade of dark and soft, but not so soft and not too hard. It's really works well for these types of illustrations, so that we can ink over the line work and then erase without affecting the paper or the ink work that we have done. Okay, so I'm just working out a shape here, the body parts, the pose for Storm. So as I said, we have Storm here with the Soulsword. So the Soulsword is Ilyana Rasputin, aka Magic's sword, from Magic from the New Mutants, now the X-Men. So now Storm has it. Now other characters have had the Soulsword in the past. Kitty Pryde has had access to the Soulsword, and this was for stories back in the X-Men comics back in the 1980s when Chris Claremont was writing both, at least writing X-Men. He might have been writing New Mutants there at the beginning at that time. So when another character takes hold of the Soulsword, takes possession of it, the armor starts to appear on them much like it does for Magic. Did the same thing with Kitty Pryde. I want to do the same thing here with Storm, and I'll get more into those details and that sort of line of thinking as we move towards that detail. So right now I wanted to utilize the space I have here to create an image here that allows us to see Storm, that allows us to see the Soulsword, and also the location from the three different polls on Twitter. So I wanted to make sure I had room to incorporate all three of these elements in my commission style illustrations. Now I did go full figure here. It's rare that I do full figure commissions in these types of commission options and sizes. Usually at 9x12 I go half figure, which is down to maybe the thigh, maybe just to the knee or upper calf, just to allow for as much detail in the face and body as possible. The more of the body I fit on the page, the smaller everything has to be to account for that. Now in this pose that I've gotten for Storm here, she's it's a bit more of an action pose. She's got a wider stance. She's lowered that shoulder. She's got the sword in such a way that we can see the full length of the sword. Readjusting the head here so that it fits a little better on her shoulders, and conveying the body language that I want. She's kind of got the sword and she's kind of almost getting battle ready. It's like she's getting into position to either go into defense or make the first strike. So as I was saying here about the Soulsword manifests armor, it starts off with usually just the left arm, shoulder pad, and arm armor, gauntlet, elbow, guard, and it also does the right leg, historically for Magic and for Kitty Pryde. So I wanted to do the same with Storm. So as you can see there with her shoulder, I'm utilizing the shoulder pad motif, the shoulder armor motif, as has been established, but I'm tapping into the time that Storm had shoulder pads for her costume, and that was in 1992 when Jim Lee redesigned the X-Men. So I'm using that 1992 era shoulder pad with the X logo as a callback to Storm's costume there. And that's how the armor is starting to manifest itself, is in a way that kind of harkens back to a previous design. So just structuring the face more here, getting more details in. I like to work step by step, bit by bit. Just kind of honing things in from a very skeletal sort of shape, very basic shapes for the head, the body, the arms, the legs, kind of getting that pose down. Not putting in too many details in at first, because I want to make sure the structure of things is where I want it to be before I start committing to the details. Because once I start going down the road of details, if something's not fitting the way I want or I should, then I'm going to end up having wasted time on details built on something that was maybe not the way I truly wanted it to be. So it takes practice and discipline to develop that patience and that eye to see, have I done all the underdrawing work the way I need to first? Sometimes it can get so exciting to get to those details that it's like jumping too far ahead, and it's like, oh man, this arm is in the wrong place, or this leg is too short, but I've already devoted 3 hours here to all these details, and then it's just like, so frustrating. So I really had to teach myself to take my time, think it through, get those shapes down right, because it's easier to course correct and readjust those shapes, just as I did with that head in those early stages, to make sure it's there. And sometimes I have to step back, get a fresh eye to make sure things are fitting where they need to be as best as possible. So this underdrawing work can be a very crucial time. It's really thinking through the puzzle before we start to put the icing on that cake. So, but I work at it stage by stage. It kind of comes to life bit by bit by bit. As I start to get that initial structure down, I'm then going to start tightening up the details just a little bit more, and a little bit more, because it's always easier to course correct before I get too far into just blindly running down the road. It's better to work bit by bit by bit and then slowly get those details in and seeing where everything is in relation to everything else. Her hair, her eyes, her cape, her shoulders, her stance, the flow of action, the way the sword overlaps. Is this all fitting together the way that I want to? And then as I add more details, I can start to see, okay, things are fitting well. We can keep progressing, keep taking it to the next level, keep roughing it in a little bit tighter, a little bit tighter, a little bit tighter. Now, as far as going a little bit tighter, I'm not doing super tight pencils for this illustration. I'm doing pretty rough pencils, and then I'm really going to tighten things up with the inks, which will be happening in this video. So it's not going to be super duper tight pencils as I would do maybe for a cover or for my comic book interior illustration. For these commission type pieces, I sometimes like to keep the energy of the rough pencils and then tighten it up with the inks so that it's not overly penciled. I haven't put so much time into the pencils that it's taken away some of the spark that I might be able to bring in the inks. I know, I've done this so many times, I know what I'm going to do next, that I don't need to go super duper clean type pencils, because I'm going to ink over this and then erase all these lines, so I don't want to spend extra hours tightly penciling something that I know I'm going to be able to see and ink the way I need to, even over rough pencils, if that makes sense. Okay, so I like to work foreground to background. So I know that her cape will be flowing behind her, so I'm going to try to create those cape shapes, those curves, of how that will all fit behind her, thinking of how does the cape fit over her shoulder, because in this current design, Storm's current costume design, which is what I'm drawing here, it connects to her collar, so it flows with yellow trim from her collar over her shoulder and behind her back. And because I have this eldritch armor on her, I'm not going to have the cape going over that shoulder. The armor overlaps it, so the cape would fall behind that shoulder armor behind Storm. And now as I move on here to the leg, I just want to finish off this leg of her armor. Now the right leg is the armored leg, so it's very asymmetrical. It's pretty much all of her costume, but then she has the eldritch armor on her left arm and her right leg. So I kind of flesh out the foot here, and I add some armor type textures to it, metallic textures, armor type trim, jointed pieces are things I'm going to think about in the details. All right, just tighten up the fingers here that are holding the handle of the sword. Going to just consider how those would bend and fit, make sure that the arm is in the right place, and just render that part out. Now I just kind of want to add some more details to the face. Since I'm feeling pretty good where everything's at this stage, I can start coming in, putting just a little more detail. Add some earrings here, just because I like lightning bolt earrings on Storm. I just think it looks cool. Start to bring more detail to the face. Even when I pencil roughly, I like to pencil my faces as detailed or as tightly as I can with the details. I'll even come in here with my Unikura Toga HB Lead 0.3 mechanical pencil for some nice fine details, so that I'm certain of how the face looks. I want the face to look as good as possible. So I'm going to pencil that as tightly as possible to make sure that the eyes, the nose, the mouth all fit in the right places and are pleasing to look at, pleasing to see. So I really, if I pencil anything tightly, even when it's rough pencils, I'm going to pencil that face tightly to make sure that it fits together in a pleasing way, or at least as pleasing as possible. Okay, and while I tighten up details here in Storm's face and in her costume, I'm also going to do some Q&A. I'm going to answer some questions that I took on Instagram. So all these are coming from my Instagram account, and we'll kind of answer these intermittently throughout this video as well. So let's start with a question by Fallen_Finpool, and Fallen_Finpool posted, "Who is your favorite comic character?" And that's rough. It's like asking a parent who is their favorite child. I love so many different characters for so many different reasons. Now, I've been a Spider-Man fan since about age 3 or I think maybe 4, pretty much almost all my life. So I'm a huge Spider-Man fan for sure. Big Spider-Man fan. I'm also a big fan of the X-Men. I love so many different X-Men for different reasons. Storm is definitely one of my favorites. Kitty Pryde is a big time favorite. Nightcrawler, Colossus. It just goes on and on and on. So the New Mutants. So it's like so many characters that I like. So it's hard to pin down who is my one favorite character. But I can definitely say Spider-Man and the X-Men do rank really high for me. All right, we have another question here by AG. I do apologize if I butchered your handle here. It's a lot of vowels and a G and a Y in there. AG. And AG asks, "Do you like the DC Universe?" And my answer is absolutely I do. Yes, I've been a fan of the DC Universe for quite some time. I remember watching the Super Friends cartoon at age 5 or 6 or 7. So big fan of the Flash, a big fan of the Justice League, especially the 80s era Justice League. So with like Blue Beetle, Booster Gold, Martian Manhunter, Guy Gardner, Fire and Ice. I really enjoy the Justice League America, Justice League Europe, Justice League International. And then I worked on Young Justice for its entire run, the original Young Justice comic series, which they later based the cartoon on. So definitely love the characters like Impulse, Robin, Superboy, Wonder Girl, Arrowette, Secret, the characters I got to create for that comic. So definitely a fan of the DC Universe for sure. Okay, so K Williams 9000 posted, "What sort of instructions/directions do you get if you are just doing cover art for an issue?" Usually the editor will let me know what's happening in the story. Definitely let me know which characters are going to be in the story. So if it's a Spider-Man cover, maybe it's like, okay, it's Spider-Man and it's fighting, he's fighting Clash, and it's for Civil War II. It's a variant cover for Civil War II. So come up with something cool. Oftentimes they say for variant covers, they've already got the cover, the actual cover for the comic, which might reflect the story. Oftentimes for variant covers, they want a cool shot. Sometimes action, sometimes kind of a standard evergreen pose. Almost like kind of like a poster sort of image. So so I just start coming up with anywhere from 2 to 6 cover ideas. Whip up these sketches of these characters, letting them know who's who, where they are, kind of the action or what I'm thinking of in the little kind of micro story that I'm telling in that moment. Even if it's just, the characters doing something cool or posing in a cool way. I still want to try to convey even a sense of a story for the viewer, that you can look at the image and then kind of let your imagination take you wherever you want to go by looking at that one image, which is a fun aspect of comics for me. I think that's what led me to want to be a comic book artist, because I would see images of these characters and not just read the stories, but just seeing an image, and so it's like, oh, what if Spider-Man fought this character and that character and teamed up with this one and that one, just kind of like playing with action figures in your mind sort of thing. So yeah, pretty much those are some of the key points. Oftentimes they tell me what's going on in the story, and definitely letting me know which characters are on there. And then they want me to be as creative as possible. Sometimes they say, we want a specific scene. I've gotten that before, and I'll come up with that scene, but then I'll just throw in a couple of other ideas. And sometimes I think of something that maybe they hadn't thought of, but it really strikes a chord with them, and they go, actually, we really like this idea. Run with that one, or take that idea and merge it with this other idea. So take these 2 cover ideas and kind of merge them into one, because we like the elements of this sketch A, and we like the elements of sketch B here, or sketch D, and then just kind of merge those together to make an all new image. And then I'll just take those elements, kind of composite them, and then show them that. And oftentimes they're like, awesome, just what we wanted to see, run with it. So that's kind of how it goes. It can often go down for me when I'm working on a cover image for a specific comic. Okay, we have a question by fanboy.comics. comics with an X. Favorite live action Spidey portrayal? I think everyone's done a great job, from Tobey Maguire to Andrew Garfield to Tom Holland, even Nicholas Hammond, for those that saw those old 1970s made-for-TV movies. I think everyone's done a great job with their craft. But for me personally, I have to say I really like Tom Holland as Spider-Man. He just cracks me up. I think he does a great job, and I really like having Spider-Man as part of the MCU. So the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So I'm putting my vote towards Tom Holland as my personal favorite. But that's not to disparage the work of the other people. I think they did a great job as well. So as you can see, I've just been adding these details in bit by bit by bit, referencing Storm's current costume, which I've drawn this costume a couple of times for a couple of different covers, oddly enough, coming off of answering that cover question. I drew this version of Storm on my Marauders #1 variant cover and my X-Men Children of the Atom #1 variant cover. So I've drawn this costume a couple of times, so I'm pretty familiar with it, but I like to double check by running a Google image search or grabbing those comics to make sure I'm getting the trim, especially that gold trim of her costume, down just right. Now I'm using my straight edge here. Always good to have drafting tools as a comic artist. So I get nice, straight, clean lines here for her sword. And now Illyana has had two different soul swords back from the 1980s up until like the mid 2000s through the early 2000s. She had a very slender traditional type sword, and then forget which X-Men comic it was, but at least just prior to Extraordinary X-Men, if it was not Extraordinary X-Men, she got this really big wide blade, almost like the width of a snowboard. It always looked like a snowboard to me, which I thought looked really cool, with a lot of black trim on it. So I wanted to create a soul sword for Storm here that kind of captures both of those aspects. I thought a thinner, streamlined sword would be more befitting of Storm's character, but I wanted to utilize some of the black striped elements similar to Magic's current soul sword in Storm's sword here. So it kind of reflects a little bit of the both. And on the hilt here, usually Magic has had a very ornate hilt to her sword, and I wanted to continue that as well, but I wanted to take it up a notch. I chose to use Storm's original headdress from her original costume from Giant Size X-Men #1, designed by legendary X-Men artist Dave Cockrum. I wanted to utilize that as the shape of her hilt. So it kind of has that look similar to Magic's, but it's uniquely Storm's because it looks like it's the same shape as her original costume headdress. I thought this will be a great time to be able to incorporate that element of Storm's look in her soul sword aspect. And it's really fun to kind of start to blend these ideas and possibilities together, things that harken back to elements of the character that we have known from before, whether it's the Jim Lee shoulder pad or the headdress of her original costume, things like that. All right, let's see. We have a question here from Gabriel Lima 2235. Which is your favorite 80s, 90s cartoon? For me, oh gosh, so many cartoons, especially growing up as a kid in the 1980s. I have a lot of favorites from the 80s, but I'd want to say Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends was a very pivotal cartoon for me because it introduced me to the greater Marvel Universe. It introduced me to characters I hadn't heard of before, like Doctor Strange or the Submariner or the X-Men. That's where I first learned about the X-Men. And they did 3 separate X-Men episodes, and I loved all 3. I wanted to know more about these characters. I wanted to know about them so much more that is what sent me to go read comic books, because I wasn't getting enough. 3 episodes was not enough. And I knew these guys are in the comic books. Maybe I should start checking out the comics, and then I can learn more about these characters. So that's what led me to buy my first 3-pack of comics at a Target store. Secret Wars issues 7, 8, and 9 just jumped right in the middle of a story. And so because we didn't have a comic book shop where I lived in my small Texas town in the 1980s, I bought my comics on a grocery store spinner rack, or in these 3-packs I would see at Target. And I'd just buy any random old issue and just jump in the middle of stories right and left. Started reading a series right in the middle of whatever story was the latest issue on the rack. And I had no other choice. There was no, here's the first issue, jump on point. It's just like, here's the latest issue, come on in and start reading. And I was able to have fun with that. I enjoyed that. It was like a mystery. I was just thrown into the middle of a mystery. I'm reading the stories as they came out each month, but I could also read back issues whenever I could find them, or they would reference stories from the past and specify with editor notes which issue that was in, so I can make note of, okay, someday I'll have to get that one specific comic. But at least I can understand what's going on now because they have referenced what happened in the past. So I didn't need to start at an issue 1. That wasn't an option for me. So I'm a big proponent of, if you want to read comics, don't worry about where to start. Just go to the comic shop, look on the rack and see what grabs your eye. Are you interested in Spider-Man or Batman or a specific character? Just go and see what's available, pick it up and start reading, and see where that takes you. It's kind of like, I kind of think of it like getting to know a person. When you meet somebody, you don't know their whole life. You weren't there with them as soon as they were born. You meet them where you do now, and you get to know them as y'all go through life together, whether it be school or at work. But then you hear stories of their past, and they start to round out more, and they start to flesh out more, and they start to become, the friendship starts to grow deeper and deeper because you're learning more about them as you move forward and hearing about their past, sometimes at the exact same time. So it's kind of like that for me with comics. It's like I got to know Wolverine just by picking up this one random issue of the X-Men, and then I got to learn more about the mystery and the history of this character as I moved forward and found out things that happened in his past. So I think that's a fun part about comics, is that you can just kind of come into these paper soap operas and have fun discovering things as you go and picking up on the clues, picking up on the story beats from their past and how that's affecting their present day and what is going to happen next in their future. So that's a kind of a wibbly wobbly answer to what was my favorite cartoon, but that cartoon really changed my life because that led me to becoming a comic book collector, which then a couple of years later led me to realize I wanted to become a comic book artist. So that's why that cartoon holds so much for me, even though it ran for just I think barely 60 episodes, probably well shy of 60 episodes. I can't remember the exact number. But I think it had one full season, a half second season, and then 3 episodes for the 3rd season, and then it was done. So there weren't a lot of episodes, but the episodes that they did make really meant a lot to a young Todd Nauck. All right, for these commission style pieces, I tend to do a background element where I put in kind of this rectangular shape to kind of frame the character and then fill it in with either cross-hatching, a fade, or maybe some backgrounds. Now I'm going really detailed with these backgrounds. In the poll, the 3rd poll from AIPT.com was a location, and Krakoa was the winning location. Krakoa is the mutant island that was a villain to the X-Men long ago when they first encountered it in Giant Size X-Men #1, and is now not only their friend, but is the island that the X-Men currently live on here in the Dawn of X. So I'm working in elements of Krakoa, and he's very kind of otherworldly in his foliage. It's a living island, and he can manifest it, or he, she, it, whatever it is, we'll just say it, can manifest its face in the foliage around him. So he could, I keep on wanting to say he, I guess because I think Krakoa is a boy's name. I don't know. I say jokingly. I don't think Krakoa even really has a gender as the thing. So Krakoa can manifest Krakoa's face wherever it is on the island. It's all sentient. It's all alive. So I put Krakoa's face down there in the ground, and then I've got some bulbous type of flowers, some kind of luminescent gel polyps on the trees and bushes here. Just trying to work in some of that here in the panel behind Storm. as kind of a framing element, but then it's also, Krakoa is spilling out of the panel borders there at the bottom. So it all kind of creates hopefully a pleasing graphic sort of design. So I'm just putting in some bushes, some grass, some rocks, just roughing out some of the nature, the foliage and rocks and the textures behind Storm to really bring home that Krakoa feeling. So just I'm getting the pencils to right about where I want them to be. We're getting them to a point where I feel confident in jumping right into the inks. I've got enough information here, because that's what these pencil lines are for me, is the information that is leading me to that next step of final line art. The truest part of the art will come in the inks. The sketch was was a stage I could build these somewhat tighter pencils on, even though these are still pretty loose. These somewhat tighter pencils, somewhat tighter details here and there where necessary to make sure I have that information I need to do the inked art. That's the finished line art. So this is not a pencil art drawing. So I'm not committing all my time to these pencils because they are just a stage. They are just information for me so that I can start to move into inks, which we're going to be doing here really, really soon. So just double checking, like this lightning bolt here. I want to bring that lightning bolt down from the sky to the sword, and then kind of down and out of, not just out of panel, but even towards off the art board. So even as I start to work on the inks, there'll be certain times in this video where you'll see me grab my pencil and tighten up a certain area just before I commit to inks, because it's like, I need to make sure that information is a little more clear for me. I just need to double check that before I commit to the inks. But I think in some places here I have enough information that I can now start to bring in the inks, and I'm going to start with the foreground. I love to start with the foreground and work my way to the background. And right now, the thing that is most in the foreground of anything else is this lightning bolt. And I want the lightning bolt to have kind of an otherworldly effect. I want it to look more energetic. So instead of using black lines, I'm using a blue Arteza brand multi-liner here, which works well with the Copics and those types of markers. And I'm drawing in the lightning bolt with blue. Like you'll see in comic books, sometimes we do a color hold, which we make, the colorist will make the black line art a color. Like for flames, they'll make those black lines orange or dark red. For ice, they might make it light blue. For lightning here, they might make it blue or yellow, depending on what color choice they've gone with. Now I'm going here with blue lightning because the Soulsword oftentimes glows blue. So in my imagination, I thought, okay, Storm, she's always pulling down lightning, and then we have this blue Soulsword, and I'm gonna channel her lightning through her Soulsword, so I want a lot of blue here working together. Blue lightning into this blue Soulsword. And I want to use this blue multi-liner to really make the lightning look more like an energy sort of signature is the intention here. And that the sword blade is glowing blue. So it has more of that energy sort of look in the color, so that when it's contrasted against the black lines of Storm, her costume, the Krakoa background environment, the blue lightning and sword will really stand out as a separate sort of object or entity that is made up of energy, that is conveying a sense of energy. All right, so while I drop in these blue lines here, I'm going to take another question here. And we have a question by Where's_Harry with extra R's. Who is your favorite superhero to draw? This is very similar to who is my favorite superhero in general. I like, and so my answer is going to be kind of similar. Still a great question. I like to draw different types of characters, different types of power sets, different types of designs, and oftentimes that is connected to characters I really enjoy. So Spider-Man, the X-Men, they rank really high in there. Characters that I care about are going to rank pretty high as some of my favorites to draw because I'm emotionally connected to these characters, and so it's fun to do my rendition of these characters that I care about. But I also like trying characters I've never drawn before, and that's happened a number of times in the past, whether it be work projects or commission requests, where I'm now drawing a character I might not have ever drawn before. And I can really discover a lot of fun in that because it's a new challenge, a new twist, gets me thinking in new ways. But some of my favorites, it's going to default to Spider-Man and the X-Men, because those are two of my favorite comic books to read and characters that I really care about. Okay, just kind of a few more energy lines here. Now I like to put a nice kind of variation of the line weight to really kind of give it that energetic sort of effect. It's crackling with energy. I'm thinking of lightning shapes, and there's going to be like a curve meeting an angle. So it's really jaggedy and really conveys, from my opinion, from my take, from my approach, what am I trying to say here? A more chaotic sort of line, something that really creates that sort of excitement and danger to electricity. I don't want it to be too soft of curves, because that softness, I think, would not translate to the danger that lightning can be, because it's such a powerful force. I want to convey that. Now I need to put in tighten up or finish these lines here for the sword. So I'm using my drafting tools again, my triangle, and just finishing off all the straight lines here next to the charged up energy lines that connect to the sword itself. So to keep these lines nice and straight, and really keeps that sword looking tight. And then that center line that runs right from the hilt to the end, tippy tip of the sword. Do a little double line here. And then I can freehand the little curved point of the sword here. Just kind of get the right angle, and then just finish off the line to ink the tip of the sword. And then these curved lines, how the blade kind of curves to points and then up to the blade. So just finish these kind of curved lines. I could use a French curve if I needed to, but since these curves are so small, I feel I can do them. I can freehand these without the use of a drafting tool. I don't want to kind of beef up some of these lines here, give it a little more weight. Especially also wanting to create a sense of depth here. Since things that are in the foreground, I want to often have thicker lines. Things that are either further in the background or maybe a tighter detail, oftentimes a thinner line. But for the contours and things that are supposed to be layered in the foreground, a thicker line is going to give that sense of it's in the foreground. And then as the lines get thinner, that can convey things moving further towards the background. Is just one way that I consider these lines. And now for the hilt, I'm going to use a different drafting tool here. I'm going to use my ellipse template. Ellipse templates are great, so I can get these oval shapes. Ellipse is spelled E-L-L-I-P-S-E, ellipse template. So if you want to look one up online, if you want to purchase an ellipse template, that's how you spell ellipse. E-L-L-I-P-S-E, template. T-E-M-P-L-A-T-E. Ellipse template, and you'll find all sorts of these. And this is my go-to one. It gives me three different types of ovals here, and I find just the right oval to fit for the top of Storm's headdress, which is now the hilt of her sword. And then these other parts of the sword, of the hilt here, that is her headdress, as I'd mentioned earlier. The curves are so small that I feel I can continue to draw these in by freehand instead of using my French curve. It all just depends on what it is I have to draw and what tool I feel I need to use at that moment. All right, let's take another question here from Instagram. I have one from Aiden_draws with a Z, comics with a Z. Aiden_draws_comics. Aiden posted, what is the one thing that you learned from drawing that you apply to your life? And that is a really, really interesting question and a really deep question, Aiden. Wow, man, you are cutting right to the quick there. But you know, I've been drawing for all my life, and I've learned a lot in the course of my art journey. And I've been able to really learn a lot, not just as an artist, but as a person. So this kind of taps into something that I strongly believe. And I would say a thing that I've learned in my art that I can and try to apply to my life is letting go of perfectionism. I used to be a person, and I can still struggle with this. Don't get me wrong, I'm still human. I have my good days and my bad days. Let's not get it twisted. I can still fall into this mindset of perfectionism. When I learned to start to let go of perfectionism, it was so freeing, because when I was younger, all the way up into the early parts of my career as a comic book artist, I would just beat myself up if things didn't turn out as perfectly as I wanted. I would just carry this frustration. And it got to a point where it really played into my a depression I was fighting and really struggling with. And because I was carrying this level of perfection, and of course, with this level of perfection, nothing can ever achieve that. That's a goal that is pretty much unattainable, that it was just starting to kill my joy and love of drawing. It didn't totally kill it. I still loved doing it, still loved pursuing it, but there was just it felt like, the best I could describe this is, it felt like driving with the parking brake on. You're moving forward, but something doesn't feel quite right. You're getting to where you want to go, but something feels sluggish. And so, as I started to learn to let go of perfectionism, and a lot of that came with comparing my art to other people's art, which I found to be a very toxic experience and was not helping me get better. When I learned that I don't have to compare myself to anyone's art anymore. I don't have to compare my art to Jim Lee or Todd McFarlane or Jack Kirby or whoever it is, because I could compare my art to anyone's art. And I think we do this as artists. And so when I realized I can stop doing that, because that's not fair to me or really to them, because every person has their own talents and their own skills, their own opportunities to learn and to study and to practice and to develop. We all are on our own paths. We're all on our own roads. Even though there's a lot of similarities, there's also a lot of differences that I don't think we really realize, because we're all different people. So the only person I really need to compare my artwork to is my own. What did I do yesterday and what am I doing today? And just do that each day. And when I started to do that, I started to find more freedom. I was like, I don't have to be perfect. I want to do the best work I can. Absolutely. I want to do the best work that I can do. And if, I miss the mark, well, that's okay. Try again. I can always try again, learn from my mistakes, try to do a little bit better the next time. Don't have to do perfectly the next time. Just do a little bit better the next time. And this is grace. Having grace on myself, which is one of the hardest things for me to do. I can be so hard on myself. And I think this is common for most people, whether you want to be an artist or if you want to do something completely not related to art or drawing at all. I think it's a very common thing as for any human, and it's something that can really, I think, drag us down, or at least it drags me down. And some of you might relate to this. Some of you might say, Todd, I have no idea what you're talking about. That's okay, no worries. But for those of you that can relate to this, please hear me. Having that grace on ourselves can really free us up. Now, mind you, this doesn't mean to slack off on trying to do better work. We still want to try to learn more and do better. So it's this kind of balancing act of how do I seek to do better, but how do I try not to carry this idea of unattainable perfection? That's why I don't like the term practice makes perfect. I don't like the word perfect in there. I like to say practice builds confidence. The more I practice, the more familiar I become with my skills, what I'm capable of doing, and then I can apply that to my art. So I keep practicing, and so there's an evolution. I want to evolve, and oftentimes that's for the better. Oftentimes I want to have those steps going forward. Sometimes steps will go backwards, and that's okay. That's just being human. It's try to keep moving so that there's a better chance of those steps being forward. So I keep moving forward down my path as an artist, that art path, that art journey. Now, and then this applies to everything in my life. So it's like, I don't have to be a perfect husband. I don't have to be a perfect friend. I don't have to be a perfect person. I can, and it's still hard. I still struggle with this idea, but it's when I learn to have grace on myself, and my wife really helps me with this when I totally blow it and make a big mistake and I'm beating myself up. She's very gracious, and she kind of is there to kind of walk with me and say, it's okay, I forgive you. And so with her forgiving me, and it's like, yeah, I hear that you forgive me. I can accept that, but how do I forgive myself? That's the biggest challenge. But the more I've learned to do that, the more my life has gotten, I think, a better quality of life. And so learning to take perfectionism, the idea of this unattainable perfectionism, is what I want to specify. Taking that out of my art is how I can see how I can try to take that out of my life and live with the flaws, but also try to do better the next time. If I make a mistake, if I hurt somebody's feelings, I'm sorry for that. I don't want to continue to live that way, but I don't want to keep beating myself up over that. That's not the way to live life. It's if you're repentant and it's like, I choose to not be that way, that's the good thing, because everyone's going to make mistakes and do things that are not good. But am I going to stay in that place, or am I going to have grace on myself, try to forgive myself as best as possible, get forgiveness from who I have offended, and then move forward from there is the thing I'm trying to say. So that's kind of how an aspect I've learned from my life as an artist, I can apply it to the non-art lives of Todd Nauck, the human being. So really deep answer, and hopefully I answered that pretty well. It didn't get too confusing, but it's something that I really feel it's a core value of mine. It's not just as an artist, but as a person, and my beliefs and my faith. So I just wanted to, you ask a question like that, and that's the kind of answer you're going to get. Thanks for being patient and letting me kind of ramble on about that. In a kind of wibbly wobbly way, but you longtime viewers of my videos, you know that I tend to give wibbly wobbly answers. All right, let's get back to some of the what's been going on here with the inking. So as you can see, I've been inking, starting to put the inks towards the face, or at least the outer contour of her forehead, cheek, chin, jawline, and now into the hair. This hair overlaps, so I want to make sure I can kind of start to address this. And I don't have to ink into every individual strand, but I do ink some of the key shapes. I break it down into shapes, and then from those shapes, I put in different hair strand details. The further I am away from the light source, especially as the hair starts to flow towards the back of the head, underneath portion, I'm gonna have more concentrated lines to create a sense of depth. But the pieces that are here towards the top of the head, the outer part of the hair, that's going to be a bit more open because there's more light getting there. So I don't want to draw every single strand of hair. Now that's just my style. Maybe you want to draw every single strand and you can make that work. Go for it. You do you. But this is my approach here. And for some of you, you might go, yeah, that's the kind of approach I want to do too. Some of you might say, I'm going to draw every single strand of hair and it's going to be glorious. And I say, go for it. Go for it. Have fun creating. Now I've brought my pencil back in here because I want to just make sure I have the right flow from the outer part of the hair that then curves towards the root of the hair that connects to the head. Now, usually in this outfit, Storm has a kind of this headgear and a ponytail. I decided if she's got that soul sword out, we're just going to let the hair fly. The hair has come loose, and we're going to have just let big hair flow, and not be restrained by the ponytail in this situation. All right, question time. Let's see. Over at Instagram, we have this one from J_Scarps. Have you ever considered doing a Procreate live stream? Not Procreate yet, no. There's still a lot to that program that I'm having to learn to get better at it, get decent at it. Right now, to do a live stream with that app, I think would be a bit of a hot mess. I feel more confident with the skills and the time that I have put into learning how to use Clip Studio Paint on my Wacom Mobile Studio Pro, because I use that for my professional work. For the comic books I draw, whether it be the interior pages or the covers, I do my sketches and pencils digitally with that. And I have done a few I have done a few Clip Studio Paint digital art live streams here on my YouTube channel. Hopefully you've had a chance to see them. I'm creating a dedicated digital art playlist, so you can see the three or four that I've done so far. And but if I get a chance to study and practice and learn to utilize Procreate to a more consistent way, a way that feels that I have something to offer, I guess I should say, in such a live stream, then yes, I'd love to be able to do that at some point. It's just finding the time to devote to really learning how to use that app has been very slow going, because I have so many other projects and things that I'm working on currently that it doesn't really allow me the time to devote to the Procreate app. But I've seen people do amazing things with it, and I want to get better at it so I can try to do some cool things with it as well. So who knows what the future holds. All right, let's see. Rain_Raman asks, which comic era of Kitty Pryde is your favorite? Let's see. I make it no secret that Kitty Pryde is one of my all-time favorite characters. And especially from the X-Men. She's definitely one of my favorite X-Men, especially currently. She's one of my favorite X-Men. And I'd probably have to say my favorite era would probably be the late 80s through early 90s, when she was on the X-Men moving into Excalibur. That kind of era is when she was a teenager and I was a teenager at that same time. It would probably be my favorite era of Kitty Pryde, but I like her today as well, all throughout her storyline. So, but as far as the character I connected with, that's when I connected with her the most, especially was when she was on Excalibur. And of course, that Excalibur series was written by Chris Claremont and drawn by Alan Davis. And Alan Davis is one of my top four, what I consider one of my top four influences and inspirations. So there was a lot of poring over those comics, especially as a teenaged artist. So that probably helped influence my fandom for Kitty Pryde, as well as the Alan Davis art mixed with some really fun and wild Chris Claremont stories. All right, let's see. We have this question by Sir Jack of All Trades. If you could work on any comic that you haven't worked on before, which would it be? Golly, let's see. A comic that I haven't worked on before. I would probably say maybe Fantastic Four. I have never worked on a Fantastic Four title. I've drawn the characters in other types of stories, like Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man 13, but I have not worked on like a Fantastic Four story arc, and I think that would be kind of fun to do. So that one would be one of the first ones that comes to mind. I've never worked on an official X-Men title, like done a story in an official X-Men title, like Uncanny X-Men or X-Men. I've worked with a lot of X-Men characters, like the Nightcrawler series, the X-Men Wedding Special with Kitty Pryde and Colossus, but I haven't worked on an X-Men proper team book title. So that would, of course, be way up there, since I have a deep love for the X-Men as well. Over at DC Comics, I'd love to do like a book that stars Blue Beetle and Booster Gold, one of my favorite duos in comics. I'd love to do a book that stars the two of them, or maybe an issue of The Flash or Green Lantern. So those would be some of the titles I think would be fun to work on that I have not worked on yet. All right, let's take another question. This one is by Sarah_Shen_. And Sarah posted, how did you get hired by Marvel? Well, I got my first paid published work at Marvel when I was still in art school. I think I just turned 21 years old, and it was for a comic book that was Marvel's humor comic book called What The? And I would see the editor of that specific comic. She also edited the She-Hulk series, amongst other titles at Marvel. at the Dallas comic book conventions, and so I'd see her like every 2 or 3 times a year. For how frequently they had the Dallas comic book conventions, they had them 3 times a year, and she was at most of them. So she kept seeing the progression of my art, and then she finally, from late teens to early 20s, and then she finally said, you know what, I'll buy a 1-page gag off of you to run in the What the Humor comic book, because my style was really kind of cartoony at that time. It was still like hyper cartoony actually. So it fit well with What the, maybe not, didn't fit well with the Marvel Universe yet. So that was my first paid published work, was getting a job from an editor by showing my portfolio at a convention, though it took numerous shows to get there. But then once I broke into the industry, it was through working for Rob Liefeld, the creator of Deadpool, for his Image Comics studio, Extreme Studios. That's where I got my big full-time break, which worked for him for 2.5 years. That led to me working at DC Comics, where I did the Young Justice comic book series, the original series, plus the first Teen Titans cartoon adaptation comic book. So it wasn't until about 2006 when my Young Justice writer, Peter David, dear friend, he was working on the Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man series. The current artist, legendary Mike Wieringo, was leaving the book, and the editor asked Peter, who do you want to work with? Are there any artists that you particularly want to work with once Mike leaves the book? And Peter said, I want to work with Todd Nauck. And so Peter had emailed me saying, hey, I threw your name out to the Spider-Man editors. They might be reaching out to you about drawing some Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. Would you be interested in that? And I'm like, absolutely. 1, a chance to work with you again, and 2, a chance to work on Spider-Man. So they hired me for a fill-in arc in May of 2006, and they asked me to do 2 issues, which they immediately bumped to 3 issues, and then they had another artist do a 3-issue arc. Then they asked me back to do another 3-issue arc, and they just kept extending that arc or that run from coming back to do 3 issues, and ultimately I ended up doing the last 7 issues of that series before they relaunched the Spider-Man books with the One More Day, Brand New Day storyline. So after doing those 10 issues of Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, then I was just kind of on Marvel's radar, and the editors kept giving me projects like American Dream, Spider-Man the Real Clone Saga, Spider-Man Meets Obama, all sorts of one-shots, annuals, covers. Then they gave me the Nightcrawler series, and then that led to Spider-Man and Silk, and Deadpool, Spider-Man Deadpool, Sleepwalker, Cosmic Ghost Rider, Spidey, and now currently Gwen Stacy are just some of the titles that I've gotten to work on with Marvel so far. So that was kind of how I got hired by Marvel to work full-time. So it was kind of got my feet wet as a young kid artist, getting to do that 1 page, all the way back in those art school days from that Dallas comic book convention meeting with that editor. But it wasn't until my work had developed at a greater professional degree, and having worked with a writer that really enjoyed working with me, that got me into working for Marvel full time. And then once I was in, that relationship continued to grow as I shared that list of different Marvel comics that I've gotten to work on, just the ones I can remember off the top of my head. All right, so this next question comes from J. Bren's Crafts. Do you still warm up / practice things like gestures, or does your workload keep you sharp? My workload definitely keeps me sharp. I believe that any drawing we do is practice for the next drawing we're going to do. So whether I'm doing stuff for work, whether I'm working on commissions, whether I'm doing something for fun, or whether I'm doing a warm-up, then a sketch, then it's all practice. It's all me utilizing the knowledge I have and trying to utilize new things that I can learn. So for me, just drawing all day, every day is gonna just allow for that opportunity to evolve and grow my art, whether it is specific disciplined study and practice, or whether it's working with what I already know. I'm still wanting to try to challenge myself to do something different than I did last time. When you're working with certain characters, like Spider-Man, a lot of Spider-Man artists will say one of our biggest challenges is not drawing the same pose we drew again and again and again. You draw Spider-Man swinging, you want to try to vary it. There will be similarities between certain poses, but just trying to avoid drawing that exact same pose, the exact same shoulder angle, arm, the way the arms are spread, the way the legs are contorted. You want to try to do something different. So that can be one of my greatest challenges, is trying to think, wait, have I done this pose before or not? I've drawn a lot of Spider-Man over the years, whether it be for work, for covers, or for commissions. So I hope I'm not repeating something here. So sometimes I can kind of get a feeling, a vibe of like, wait a second, I think I did something pretty similar to this. Sometimes I can run a Google search for Todd Nauck Spider-Man and see all the stuff that I did at a quick glance, or not all of it, but a good chunk of it. And I'll scroll through there. It's like, okay, does anything of this look exactly the same? No, okay, then I might be on a good path here. So just that idea of continually trying to challenge myself to try to do something new or different with the character's poses, camera angles, lighting, things like that can help me practice while I work, if that makes sense. So it's always steady, it's always evolving as far as I'm concerned. But great question. All right, so as you see as I've worked on Storm's armor there, like on the breastplate there, I've put in a metal shine. I want to try to capture that metal sort of texture. And then here on the rest of her costume, I'm working on like the yellow trim that goes on the cape and on her costume. I'm also going to be figuring out how to light her costume. So her costume is mostly black, but there'll be open areas due to lighting, which would then be filled in with gray. So it shows this gradation of black to a highlight. Even if that's gray, it's lighter than black. So a lot of people ask, how do you know where to put the black how do you know how to shade and highlight a black character, a character with black parts to their costume, I should say. So my rule of thumb is light source. Where is the light coming from? Or the major light coming from, or where is reflected light coming from? And then what is the shape of that object? So oftentimes if it's a character's costume, it's going to be their muscles, their shoulders, their arms, their chest, their abs, their legs, things like that. So if I think of each section as a shape, its own shape, whether it be the shoulder, the bicep, the tricep, the forearm, the wrist, the fingers, the chest, the pectoral muscles, the breast, the rib cage, the abs. I'm going to think of each of those as its own individual shape. And then I'm going to think, where's the light coming from? Where is it going to hit? Like here on Storm's chest, the light's going to come from, the main light source I'm having come from above, from the sky, because she's on this Krakoa island. So there's going to be the sun. Right now, I'm assuming it's the sun coming down. Also, the lightning bolt's kind of coming from the sky. So maybe there are some clouds. Maybe it's not so much the sun, but the lightning bolt. But anyhow, it's from above is the main light source. And then her sword is kind of casting light as well a bit. So I'm going to consider that, especially when we get to the coloring stage. So with the shape here, I consider the shape of her breast. So the light is hitting the top part of it, and as it curves around, that's where I'm going to fill in black. And so you've seen I've drawn the line there for that black area. I just will fill that black part in later. And then I move that down into her midsection. I'll do this more throughout the arms, where there is the main light source, a reflected light source. This costume is going to be kind of more kind of like a shiny leather. So I'm going to have some very white highlights through this, much like if you want, I hope y'all had a chance to see my Iron Man live stream illustration series that I did last week. You can go back and watch. And my approach to coloring in there with the white highlight running down the sides of him for his shiny metal armor is a similar approach I will use here with Storm, with her kind of shiny, pleathery sort of costume here. That the black is going to be very shiny and reflective, just because I think it'll make for a cool looking effect and would really play well with the lightning bolt and the glowing Soulsword as a light source as well. All right, let's take another question. This is from Zach T. Johnson 7567 on Instagram. What is your favorite comic book related movie? Man, the MCU probably has a lot of my favorites. Infinity War / Endgame is one of my favorite. I consider that one movie in 2 parts. So I love that because I love comic books where there are a bunch of superheroes doing a bunch of different stuff. Like Secret Wars or Crisis on Infinite Earths. I love that sort of stuff. Those were the kind of comic books I started reading, so I love big cast comics. I love that Marvel built their way up to these big cast movies, these 2-parters like Infinity War and Endgame. So that, hopefully I said that before, Infinity War, Endgame. I fear I said Infinity Gauntlet, which is the comic book series that these movies were inspired by. Infinity War and Endgame were so much fun because it had so many characters. But if we're going to put those off to the side, I would say Thor Ragnarok is probably my favorite solo character superhero movie, comic book related movie. I felt that what Taika Waititi did was so cool, so fun. The visuals, the soundtrack, the story, the humor, the stakes. It was all so much fun. It felt like I was watching an 80s comic book come to life. And as I say all the time, I grew up as an 80s kid. That's where things were. I discovered all the cool stuff that I'm into, as because we discover it when we're kids and then we become fans of that stuff most of the time, and that carries with us on through our lives. So that 80s kind of flavor just really appealed to that kid in me, and it still holds up for me. I was just watching that on one of the cable channels just a couple of months ago. It was on, and where I was at, and my wife and we were just entranced because she grew up the same time I did, so she has all those same sensibilities. So we just watch it and we laugh and get excited by it and just enjoy the whole experience of the movie. Hela was a great villain. Grandmaster was fantastic. So Cate Blanchett and Jeff Goldblum did such great jobs with their characters, and of course Thor and Loki as a buddy duo there, I thought was really fun, and I really liked the turn they took with Loki, and then having Doctor Strange guest star, I thought was great too. So that one I have to say is probably my favorite comic book related movie. But there are so many great ones out there as well. I mean, that's just the very tip of the iceberg for me. So as you can see here, now like with the black parts of her gloves, I'm thinking about each individual finger. I'm thinking about the light that's hitting there, and where is the shadow? The shadow is going to be on that opposite side. That shadow, that black, is going to give that chunky form to her fingers. Now here with the arm, I'm putting the darker section of the black costume in the center, on the inside of the arm, but I'm leaving a sliver of highlight to come in from the Soulsword, but then we have the highlight from above on the center part of her arm there in between her bicep and tricep, and then that thin layer on the outside of her arm for reflected light as well. So I'm leaving myself these options, or the colorist, if this was going to a colorist, options on how to color it and light it. So these are the things I'm going to think about. So like if you take an art class, if you were took art as an elective in junior high or high school, maybe you'll get to if you're not quite in junior high or high school yet, to all the young viewers. One of the first things we learn to do in an art class is draw a sphere. So they'll have like a ball of some sort of sphere sitting on a pedestal with a light shining on it. And the exercise is you're going to look at that sphere, you're going to see where the light's hitting, and that's where the highlight is. And then there'll be a shadow, and that's where you're going to render out the shadow with your pencil. And then you're going to put the shadow that casts onto the table. And then a really good instructor will be pointing out to you, now the light is going also past this the sphere and bouncing off the table and reflecting. There's reflecting light onto the ball. So there's going to be this little sliver of highlight that runs on the edge of the ball on the opposite side of the shadow. So this is the mentality I take into rendering the black of a figure of their costume. I'm thinking of each section of the muscles, as I mentioned earlier. I'm thinking of them as those that approached as to that sphere, whether it be a spherical sort of joint like a chest or a shoulder, or it might be more cylindrical, like the upper arms or the lower arms or the fingers. So I'm going to think in a series of spheres, of cylinders, of pyramids, of whatever shape that element, that section of their body or costume is, whether it be the cape, which is going to be flowing and flitting about. Those are going to be different shapes. I'm going to think of that as, how is this shape curving? How is it flowing around, and where is the light going to hit? And sometimes I have to go in there and figure that out. It's like, okay, if the light is hitting here and this bends this way, that means where it bends around away from the light, that's where that black shadow is going to be. This is the kind of mentality, and it takes a lot of practice to get there, to kind of get that to where it's a point, get it to the point where it is second nature. That's where we want to be, is that it becomes second nature. So I only need to really face the challenge when I get challenged, but when it's something I've done so many times over and over and over again, it's that second nature, and I can just let that muscle memory kick in. All right, so as I'm working on Storm's armor here, I'm going to be addressing a specific part of her armor here, and that is coming up here soon, her right leg. Now, her right leg is going to be armored, much like it was for Magic and Kitty Pryde when they were wielding the Soul Sword. So, what I've done here is I thought about how to armor her leg, and I wanted to utilize another part of her costume from the past, going back to that original Giant Size X-Men #1 Dave Cockrum design of Storm's original costume. She had the thigh-high boot with the oval cutaways. I wanted to make her armor look like that. So it kind of harkens back. Again, I love to harken back to another time of the character, an element that is familiar to that character. So utilizing that shape here for the upper part of the leg armor, which will be silver, not black like her original boot, but it'll be a silvery armor. Then I trick it out with like this knee guard, and it's jointed and it's got trim running along it. And I'm going to give it that silvery texture. I'm going to give it kind of a similar trim and detail as artists like John Romita Jr. did. I think I was when Kitty Pryde, or the time I remember Kitty Pryde taking up the Soul Sword, John Romita Jr. was drawing her at that time. And then, of course, I believe it was Bill Sienkiewicz was drawing New Mutants at the time, where Magic was a regular character in that series. So seeing her Eldritch armor come to manifest itself. So these are the things I'm thinking about. I'm thinking what had been done in the past, and how can I kind of tap into that, but then how can I make it something new and my own, and get creative with it. And this is where it can be really fun to really let my knowledge and memory of X-Men lore play into creating something that's new. It's familiar, but it's new at the same time. And so that's what I was thinking of, and something I was very excited to do, to really get to play with it. And for those that remember Storm's original costume, have seen it and recognize it, but also know Magic's Eldritch armor, they're going to see what I've created here and go, oh, that looks familiar. I see what you did there. Is what they would say. So that's my intention there, to capture these recognizable Storm elements and infuse them into this new take on Storm, where she has taken up the Soul Sword and her Eldritch armor is starting to appear, and appear in a way that is recognizably or distinctively Storm, is the thing that it's tapping into who she was. Like it's manifesting itself in these ways from her past. That was kind of the mentality I was going with here. All right, this next question comes from Loiterer87. Outside of Mystery Science Theater 3000 and superhero comics, what other sci-fi/fantasy things do you enjoy? And will we see you draw any of them for a YouTube video? Let's see. Well, I'm a big Star Wars fan all my life. I was a little kid when the very first Star Wars movies came out, episodes 4, 5, 6. So I had all the action figures and I had some of the vehicles and play sets. So I love Star Wars. I'm a Doctor Who fan now. I didn't really watch much of the classic Who. I didn't really get it at a young age. But now that I'm older, I enjoy the current Doctor Who as well as classic Doctor Who. So I'm into the Doctor Who. I like shows like Lost. I think that would fall under that category. Is there anything else? I kind of like some Star Trek. I liked Star Trek Next Generation. I didn't watch all the Star Trek shows, but I liked Next Generation. I want to check out Picard, I should say, and Discovery. Those I hear are really good, so I'd like to check those out at some point. I'm way behind in my Doctor Who viewing. I still have to finish the 12th Doctor's last season and subsequent, and his last 3 Christmas specials before I get into the 13th Doctor, but I look forward to that. So I'd say those are some of the sci-fi / fantasy. Oh, and the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit movies, I enjoyed those too. Will I ever be drawing any of that in a future YouTube art video? You never know what the future holds. You never know. So there's always that possibility. I have drawn, I do have a couple of Star Wars art related videos. I have a Darth Vader on a post-it note sketch and my Asaka Tano sketch that I did for my 6 fan arts. So those videos are up on my YouTube channel now. So if you're itching to see me draw some sci-fi fantasy type art, then you got two videos up there waiting for you to see right now. So thanks for that question. Let's see, we have a question here from Soul_twice. What other interests do you have besides drawing? Music? Hiking? What does Mr. K do during his day? Let's see. I like to hang out with my friends. I like to play games. I like board games. I like card games. So I like to play games like a card game called Nerds, which is kind of like, have you heard of the game Solitaire? Imagine playing that with like 4 or 5 people. Everyone has their own deck of cards. It's like fast-paced, frenzied Solitaire played in a group. And it's you against everyone else. So everyone's playing for their own score. So that's really fun game. I like to play Texas Hold'em every now and again for friendly stakes. I like to play some video games. I'm not a big video gamer. I wouldn't even call myself a video gamer at all. I play so infrequently, but I enjoy a game like Mario Kart with friends every now and again. What do I do during my day? What I do during my day is draw. I draw almost all day, every day, and by the time I'm done with the day, it's time to eat dinner, watch a TV show, and then call it a night and get up and start it all over again. So I really don't pursue many other activities outside of drawing, but I have such a passion for drawing. I find that to be very fulfilling. But I do enjoy doing other things, like doing things with my wife and hanging out with her and other friends as well. That can be fairly easygoing. I just like to laugh, have fun, and hang out with my friends more than anything, and whatever that entails. If it's going for a hike or a walk, that I'm down for that. I like to travel. I like to travel with my wife. Doing conventions allows us to travel, visit other places across the U.S. and the world. So can't do much of that right now thanks to COVID-19. Probably won't be doing any of that here this year, which is pretty wild to think this year we will be doing like 0 traveling. We had 1 trip early this year to Phoenix, Arizona, and then we got home and the world was on. Then we had to go into lockdown mode. So we haven't been able to travel anywhere, which feels weird because I'm used to doing at least 3 or 4 conventions by this time of year. So not getting to travel will be a little disappointing, but hopefully we can be traveling again here in 2021 and get back to one of the things we really enjoy doing, my wife and I. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. All right, Sean_draw says, "Hey Todd, how goes it? What are you doing nowadays to keep yourself busy during this quarantine?" I'm drawing, Sean. I am drawing like a wild man. I'm working on commissions, side projects, and art live streams. and some art videos like this one here that I can just upload straight to my channel. So that's pretty much it. So hopefully you've been able to join me for my art live streams here that I do most of the days of the week here on my YouTube channel. So if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please subscribe. I'll just give this plug now. Subscribe to my YouTube channel and then tap the bell to set your notifications to alert you for when I schedule art live streams and upload art videos, so you don't miss out. So you can come join me when I go live, or check out a video like this when it gets uploaded. You can be one of the first ones to tune in. So yeah, so that's what I've been doing. And you know what? I'm having a great time drawing, because it's what I love to do. So I'm thankful that the thing I love to do is something I can do from home. And so yeah, it has worked out well with this stay-at-home order. All right, we have a question from Jazz.Edwards. Do you listen to music while you work? If so, what music? Most of the times I listen to TV shows and movies, but occasionally I will listen to music if the mood strikes me. And my favorite kind of music is kind of the late 80s post-punk, kind of early 90s alternative rock music, kind of that jangle guitar. So bands like, who would I say? Like the Connells, REM, Stone Roses, the Mighty Lemon Drops, Guadalcanal Diary, the Highback Chairs, Wild Swans, the Kitchens of Distinction, bands like that. Which probably some of you may not have ever heard of any of those, except for maybe REM. But it's just kind of the stuff of my late high school, early college days. So that's kind of my favorite stuff. I also like just 80s top 40 stuff, all the hits of the 80s, that new wave 80s sounds, and just anything from, I don't know, Duran Duran to Madonna, so and everything in between are some of my favorites. So that's the kind of the music I like to listen to oftentimes, and as well as my friends, the Aquabats. I enjoy their stuff as well. All right, so here I am putting the metal texture in Storm's armor here. I think of the light source again. Most likely it is coming from above, and as well I'm considering the Soulsword. So I'm thinking of how the silvery shiny metal is reflecting the world around it. It is so the black parts is kind of maybe not so much a shadow as it is maybe the trees or what Krakoa around her. If she was in the city, maybe buildings. So there's parts of it that is reflecting the environment, and then the color will come in to differentiate, kind of like horizon and sky, just all depending on the shape of that object. So I usually consider the same shape placement as I would if this was a black, if I was spotting a black, but it's not a black, it is reflective shine. But I have that same mentality of the shape, the light source, and then I kind of start to render around that and use these kind of broken lines and hashing lines to give that sort of metallic feel, for lack of a better term there. So just really texturizing it out to give a sense of a chrome, silvery, metal sort of look. And a lot of this will come in the color as well. But I think about the shape of the muscles, and these are, again, it's that, what is that specific shape? How is it rounded? How would the reflections of things around be affected, or how would it affect these shapes as far as line work would go? These are the things I'm going to think about and then experiment with. All right, let's see. Dago Card asks, do you speak another language? Is there any in particular that you want to learn? I took French in high school. I took 2 years of French and really don't remember a lot of it because it was so many years ago. I remember how to say things like je ne sais pas, je m'appelle Todd, but that's about it. I can tell you my name is Todd and I don't know, and that's about it. My wife and I were supposed to go to Germany this year for a big book fair in Leipzig. So when we found out we were going to make that trip 3 months prior, we started to learn German on Duolingo. And then as the trip approached, the world went COVID crazy, and the convention was canceled and our trip got canceled. Or at least I should say postponed. They said they'd have us back at a future date when all this COVID stuff is done. But we're still studying our German. It's like, this is fine. This gives us more time to learn German, so we can speak it maybe just a little bit better. So it could be a year before I get back to Germany or get that trip going to Germany. It all depends on the whole COVID situation and when that comic convention can reschedule. So until then, I'm going to keep studying German so that I can speak it at least a little bit and maybe say something more than "my name is, I don't know, and where's the bathroom." I want to be able to have a very simple conversation at the very least. I mean, you can only learn so much over the course of a year, but it's better than learning nothing. And my wife and I are really enjoying it. We're starting to say things to each other in German in everyday life, just as practice. So that's been fun. So now I can say "Ich heiße Todd," and so I am called Todd. So it's so much other stuff to learn. In fact, I did my Duolingo German lessons earlier today, and it's fun. I want to keep doing that, and if I can continue, maybe I'd like to relearn French, learn Spanish, and because I live in Southern California, so there's a lot of Hispanic people around me, so it'd be nice to be able to speak that language. Maybe I should learn that before I relearn French, and then go from there. So so those are the languages I currently know and or currently trying to learn, and that would be German, and actually really enjoying it. Okay, we have a question from Black_Tetsuo. What is the best way to practice anatomy? What books helped you? I would say, if you can, try to take a life drawing course or two. That can help you, I think, really learn through instruction. I would say draw from real life whenever possible. Just look at real life, study real life, and draw from that whenever possible. And then books that helped me. In my life drawing classes that I had at the Art Institute of Dallas, where I went to school, my instructor was very into Bern Hogarth. So she would teach from the Bern Hogarth technique. But there's also Andrew Loomis and George Bridgman. These are kind of like the top three, or the three most well-known life drawing instructional books. So I'd say check out those three. The Bern Hogarth one is called Dynamic Anatomy, is the one I learned from. And so that would be my suggestion there. Hopefully that helps you out. All right, so we're working on more of Storm's costume here, the black part of her costume. And again, this is that situation where people ask, how do you know where to put the blacks? Here's another chance for you to see how I do this. So I'm considering the shapes of her thighs, her knee, her lower leg, the calf muscles, the shin, the foot. So I'm thinking of, again, it's this, I feel like I sound like a broken record, but it's the way that it is. It's what we do all day, every time we're doing an illustration, considering the shape of the object and the light source. And here you can see this really come to life. I am getting the outer contours of the leg inked in, utilizing the line weights to create a sense of depth or possibly shadow. Light source coming from above, from the sky, but also coming from the Soulsword. So I have a light source that runs down the center of her leg, and then the inner side of her thigh, as I'm inking right here, going to ink a little wrinkle there at the knee of her costume. This inner side is going to be darker because it's further away from the light source. And then the outer side here, I'm going to have a thinner line to create kind of this delineation of the center highlight, and then moving towards a reflected highlight on the other side of this thinner black shadow. And then there'll be a larger chunk of black that I'll be inking here on the inside of her thigh to create form, mass, and that blackness of her costume. The costume is black, so I need to convey that, but I want to have an area where I'm putting in the white highlight, but also leaving, like I said earlier in the video, I really wanted to give this uniform that shiny, pleathery, leathery sort of color highlight to it. So I'm leaving a section right that runs along the edge of both sides of her leg, her arm, things like that, for a white highlight, as well as in the center of these blacks is where there would be grays, which would be a gradation from black to I guess I would say maybe a muted highlight, because the gray is almost a highlight because it's lightening up from the black. It's transitioning from black to gray. So here I'm finishing off that inner thigh. So all that chunk there in the middle will be, I'll probably put a little X right there. I'll remember I need to fill this in full black later on. And so I'll do this through the bottom part of her costume here, through the pelvic area. Now that's going to be covered by her forearm. It's kind of tucked away further from the light source, so I'm going to have more black there because less light is getting to it, but I will leave room for that reflected light or a highlight to give it that shiny look to her black leathery, pleathery costume. And then here I am tightening up the where I want these black areas in her shin and in her calves. I'm going to think about these things. I want to put some more of these costume wrinkles like I like to do at the joints. I'm going to add some of these to the boot bunching up around her ankle, which I think is a fun detail. I like the shapes that these wrinkles can create on a character's costume. So I'm going to think about that. I'm going to just tighten up this foot here to make sure. I'm kind of like double checking my math. You know, when you do your math and you have to show your work, just kind of double checking my math here before I go to the finished answer is what this is right here. Just making sure, do I have the shapes where I want them, where I need them before I commit to the inked line? Let's see, we have a question from Rem Springa. What's your favorite Young Justice moment that you drew? Oh man, I loved working on that series. So it's like every moment from Young Justice's Secret all the way through Young Justice 55 would be a favorite moment. I loved the entirety of working on that series. But I would say when we did our secret origin issue of our character, The Secret, when we revealed a lot of her mystery, that was really fun because we saw how tragic of a character she was, but it was done in such a cute and sweet way because there was this darkness but this cuteness at the same time. I thought Peter David did a really great job with writing that issue, and I really had a lot of fun drawing his story there and being a part of that. So I think that was issue 41 or 42. It's where Hal Jordan as the Spectre has a secret in his hand and she's seeking him for advice because it is revealed they are both similar type characters. Okay, now as I continue work on this foot here, I'm just putting in those contour lines, those main lines that make up essentially the foot. How the leg connects to the ankles, down to the foot, to the toes, to the heel, from considering the foreshortening and the angle here. And then I'll come in and start to sculpt in those black shadows. Now with the lower part of her leg here, my thought process then comes into it's angled away from the light source a little bit more so than her thigh, just a little bit. So I'd like to let's see, adding some wrinkles there to the knee. And now what I want to do is put a heavier shadow right down the center of the shin. I think it gives the character more weight in the environment. It's like the leg is more fully planted. It gives this illusion of more power in the stance that I feel, because that's that big, heavy black shape. Leaving just more of the little, our right-hand side, leaving that open for the light source and the reflected light. And then we'll address that calf muscle as well on the far right-hand side. Let's just do that right now here. Just get that knee ready. Put this spot blacks. So whenever I put those little X's on it in a shape, that means fill this in black with a brush later on. So just going to work out those shapes of the wrinkles around the ankle, and just kind of looking at, I like to look at fashion and study how do the clothes fit on a person, how do things wrinkle around. And then what shapes can I make with my art? And then here we are with the calf muscle. So the main calf muscle, black shadow, then pulls around to that where that highlight will go. And then bring this down on the inside or the outer part of the leg down to the ankle. Just kind of continuing that theme of heavier black shadow on the inside of the leg, a lighter shadow on the outside of the leg, leaving room for highlights on both sides and down the center. And then continue this down, this sort of mentality down through the foot, where the inside of the foot is going to be darker. I'm going to make that darker because it's going to be a little further away from the light than the outside or top of the foot. All right, so just a little more detail here on the foot, just kind of prepare things for when I come to spot the blacks in a little bit later. Beef up some lines every now and again, just to create more of that. Sometimes it's because of shadow, sometimes because of depth, sometimes it's because of both. So I'll just notice things where I can make adjustments as I go. You can always make a thin line thicker. You can't really make a thick line thinner unless you want to come in with whiteout and paint, and then that can become a really big mess. So it's easier just to start thin and then just go thicker whenever you realize, oh, this doesn't match up quite right. Now this is a fun thing right here. Now with Storm's shoulder pads, one, I want to put in this trim that's kind of similar to what Magic's trim would be in her classic Eldritch armor. I want to try to reflect that through Storm's X-Men 92 Jim Lee style shoulder pad, but instead of the kind of black or white, depending on if you're reading the comic or watching the cartoon, with some yellow, that yellow section on there and the red logo. This is all going to be silver, all that Eldritch silver. So just kind of roughing in some of the reflected chromy sort of shadow here, the fades, to create some shape and volume to this shoulder pad. So right at the very tippy top, and then right down here through, then there's the top, and then here down to what is the side that would kind of face the front is going to reflect the world around her. But we leave a big chunk open for the light and highlight from the lightning bolt / Soulsword. So then just creating this fade creates that illusion of reflecting the world around her. Can even tighten that up with a even smaller nibbed micron pen. Oh, and if I didn't say that before, I'm using Pigma micron pens, mostly the 08, a lot of 01, and then occasionally the 005 for some teeny tiny fine detail. All right, we have a question here from just here for coffee. Just here for coffee posted, which episode of The Office is your favorite? Mine is Casino Night. So yeah, Casino Night is a great episode, the season 2 finale episode. For me, man, so many great episodes. I love that series. It's one of my all-time favorites. I think right now I would say Benihana Christmas from season 3 is my favorite episode. It's just a really fun episode, double-sized episode, not unlike Casino Night. So I'm gonna say that one is currently my favorite episode, but that always changes. But that one really gets me. I really do enjoy that one. Let's see. The Noob Artist 2 posted, is it possible to learn anatomy from photos on social media? I would say, yeah, I think that would be possible. I don't see why it wouldn't. You're working with real life. You're looking at real life, you're translating real life into lines and shape and shading on paper. So no matter where you find your photos, you're working with real life. So is it possible? I believe it is. It all depends on the artist and the time and effort they put into their study and practice of the craft. So if that's where you're getting your real life reference, then go for it. Keep working. Keep working at it. Okay, WB Hughes Art posted, what's the best way to draw consistent borders? I say use your drafting tools, use your T-square and your triangle. You might have seen me earlier in this video when I was penciling in the background framing element. I created a border behind Storm. I used my T-square for that. I'm able to line up the art on my T-square, and then as I move my T-square up and down, I'm able to draw consistent perpendicular parallel lines. And I will do that with the inks as well. So stay tuned a little bit later here in this video when I get to inking the panel border before I start inking in all the backgrounds. You'll see me use that T-square again to line up the artboard onto the T-square and then slide the T-square up to that line I need to ink and then just run my pen across the edge of that T-square to get a nice clean panel border line. So that's my advice. It's as simple as that. It's a great tool. If you don't have a T-square yet, get yourself a T-square. Ask for it for your birthday. Ask for it for Christmas. Treat yourself if you need to buy it on your own there. A T-square and a triangle, like that orange triangle I was using, are two drafting tools that are critical for drawing comics, in my opinion. All right, so we're back to the hair, and I'm finishing out this last chunk of hair. As I move from the outside towards the inside, I'm putting in more concentrated lines. I want there to create this volume and depth. So the further the hair is away from the light source, the more shadow there is, the more concentrated lines to create a sense of shadow as well as flow to the hair. And it really helps, I think, frame the face in a really nice way. So that's my mentality and thinking there. And that hair is just going to pull from the head and out and away to the ends of the hair. All right, so let's see. I'm going to add just a little more hair back here. Just realizing I wanted a little more volume of hair right as it tapers towards the shoulder, or towards her arm, I should say, not quite the shoulder, but behind that arm. So I'm just going to rough in and then ink in just a little more hair, just to kind of give it a little more body, just to really just kind of fill it out as it tapers back. Okay, so after a few little minor adjustments here, I'm going to start working on the face. I'm going to start getting into the facial details. Right now I'm just adding a little more weight to the line that is her jaw, just like underneath her chin onto her neck there. Going to grab my 005 micron. I have all my microns handy because I'm going to be switching back and forth depending on what I need. And I like to go with the thinnest point microns for the face so I can keep the detail lines in the face really clean. The 0.8 oftentimes at a face this size would be too big of a nib. It would not allow me to get the crisp line that I want, especially on like her eyelashes, I should say, and eyebrows, which kind of fade to a point. If I have a thinner nibbed micron, I'm going to get that nice thin point that I want to pull towards as it goes from the thicker eyelid part of her eyelash out towards that tapered eyelash, pulling away towards the edge is something I'm going to think about. So that's why I want to have the thinnest nib possible. And I'm really sorry that as I'm inking that nose, the pens I was holding covered it up. I had no idea that happened. I'm recording this audio commentary after I've done the artwork here, so I'm really sorry about that. That's a little disappointing. Hopefully that doesn't happen again, but hopefully you can kind of get an idea of what I did there with inking the nose. Even though I can pencil in the entirety of a nose, at a facial shape, especially a female's facial shape of this size, I'm probably just going to ink the nostrils and the shadow of the nostrils, and then come in with more color to sculpt in the bridge of the nose, or how it looks three-dimensional on the face. But sometimes fewer lines can give just as much information as putting in every line. So it gives her nose and the shape of her face that look that I want to achieve without having to put in every single line. Sometimes we don't have to draw every single line. It's how we structure everything that can communicate exactly what that facial feature or part of the body is. So it's kind of learning where you need the lines and where you don't need the lines. Okay, and you just saw me do the lips there with the 0.05 micron. Very, very fine lines, a little thicker at the bottom of the bottom lip to create a shadow. A little bit of a cheekbone there, because she's got pretty strong cheekbones, maybe a little bit to the eyelid there. Pumping up the eyelashes, giving a nice dark dark eyelash there. A little bit of a furrow of the brow because she is very focused and determined. So don't want to do a heavy arc to the brow. That might be a little too comedic, a little too over the top. So just subtle lines on a face like Storm's can really do one well. And now I'm just going to rough out the shapes of her flowing cape, which is flowing behind her away from the lightning strike to the soul sword, the cape flaring back and away. I'm going to use my, because I have these long flowing lines, I'm going to use my French curve to get some nice curvature lines here that are nice and clean and consistent. I could try doing this freehand if I wanted to. That's totally valid as well. But in situations like this, I like to use my French curve to maximize time and the economy of line. Just make it nice and clean. All right, we have a question here from, where did that question go? There it is. From Michael Rafinsky. Michael.Rafinsky. Is there any art medium that you have not yet tried that you would like to? Yeah, let's see. It was suggested to me by one of my art friends, an artist named Rod Reese, who is the illustrator of the New Mutants series currently. He works in acrylics, and so we were at a convention talking. I think it was at C2E2. My wife and Rod and I, we were out to dinner at Giordano's Pizza. Rod was craving deep dish, and we didn't blame him. When you're in Chicago, you have to have deep dish at least once. So that's neither here nor there. But Rod, we were talking about art, and Rod was saying you should try acrylic. He goes, you do nice stuff with watercolor. You should try acrylics, and that is something I've yet to do. Rod had suggested that to me at least 2, maybe 3 years ago, and I love what Rod does with his acrylic painting illustrations. So I'd love to try that based on what I've seen Rod do. It's just taking the time to start playing and experimenting with that. So maybe that time is coming up soon here, since we're in this COVID-19 stay-at-home quarantine sort of situation. So maybe that's not too far on the horizon for me to give a try. We'll see what the future holds. So that's definitely an art medium that I'm not skilled in, that I would like to try, experiment with, and see what might develop. All right, this next question comes from Kike MNHDZ. What's the character you are requested to sketch more? My most requested character to sketch oftentimes is Spider-Man. He's a mega popular character. I mean, he's a world-renowned character. I mean, Spider-Man, Batman, Superman, I think they are known all throughout the world. They're very, very, very insanely popular characters. So so I often get requested to draw Spider-Man, I would say the most of any character out there. So yeah, it's, I think, hands down Spider-Man. And it's a good thing I love Spider-Man as much as I do, because I draw him a lot. All right, let's see. This question is from Fraser.art. Do you prefer to draw digital or hand art? Why or why not? That's an interesting question. For me, there's digital and, as you said, hand art, which I would assume you are referring to traditional art, where it's pen, pencil, marker, paint on art board. Because even with digital, I'm still drawing by hand. I'm just drawing by hand with a stylus into an art program. So it's just a different medium that I'm drawing into. The tablet doesn't really do. It's like I'm programming it to draw for me. I'm utilizing it stylus on a tablet as I would pencil on paper. So it's still all drawing by hand. It's just the difference. One of many differences is with a digital file, there's no original art. It's all trapped there inside the computer. There's no one-of-a-kind piece of art like you get with traditional art. I enjoy both because I utilize both in the work that I do. I start my work, comic books and covers, I do digital sketches, then I do digital pencils. I print that out in non-photo blue onto the artboard and then ink that traditionally with pens like these microns here on smooth Strathmore Bristol board. So I utilize both because it's all working towards getting to that end product. Some things I draw completely digitally, some things I draw completely traditionally. It's all an experience. It's all fun for me because I am creating. I'm creating these characters. What tools do I get to use? Am I using pens, markers, pencils, or am I using digital, which allows me to use digital pens, markers, pencils, airbrush, certain effects, certain, ways to light things up or create shadows and layers and stuff. So drawing digitally affords me all sorts of different ways to create art that I can't do traditionally. So I like both. I have to say I like both because for me, it's just all arsenals or all tools in my art arsenal is what I mean to say. They're all tools in my art arsenal that I utilize to create in whatever way I need to get to that end product. All right, let's see. We have a really great question here by Tu Shaniger. How do you get over anxiety of finishing or continuing an art piece? And this is not an unheard of question. And I've had that feeling as well, especially in the early days of my career. I would get overwhelmed by the idea of I've got to get all these pages drawn, in this amount of time. And it was a very overwhelming sort of feeling, but it's like, I have to do it because this is my job and I want to keep doing this for my job. So I have to meet that deadline. So that was one aspect that helped me kind of get over it, but I still felt that anxiety. And it came with over time where I would stress out about getting to the end. And over time I learned, don't worry about the end. You will get to the end. Be in the moment. Draw the thing that you are allotted to draw today. So whatever that piece is, like this piece here, I got done in one day, in one afternoon. From beginning to end, from sketch to now here we are in inks and on into finished colors, I got it done because I knew this is a piece I can get done in one day, so I can get this completed. Now, I'm not going to worry about or get too stressed out about the colors. Oh, I got to get to the colors. Right now, I'm just going to work on the pencils, getting the structure built, start adding details, get enough information down where I can start move to inks. Now here I am on the inks. Focus in on what's in the foreground, the sword, the lightning bolt. Now let's work on her hair, her face, her shoulder, and just, move my way through the rest of drawing her body and putting in where the blacks would be. Now here I am into the cape. What's going to be coming up next? Background. I know I'll be drawing a background. I'll get there soon enough. Right now, just focus on this area right here and enjoy it for the moment. And it takes practice to kind of develop that sort of mental thinking, because you are thinking about the future, but I'm not focusing on the future so much to the fact that I'm not staying present in the moment of where I'm at. Now, I've always liked to create finished artwork even as a kid. I liked to, whatever I was drawing, I wanted to see it through to the end and then move on to my next piece. That's most of my art. Then as a kid, through young adulthood, into adulthood, most pieces are finished. Now, not every piece gets finished, but the reason I don't finish a piece is because I have to devote my time and efforts to another project that does have a tighter deadline. So some things get put to the side and maybe never get picked up again if they're not of a pressing importance or deadline. So I feel for those that feel the anxiety of finishing or continuing a piece, because I speak with I hear from a lot of young artists saying, I don't know how to finish an art piece. I can start it, but I never finish it. And I wish I had a really clear-cut answer to say, well, this is how you can get past that. I can just kind of share with you from my experience, and whatever you can relate to, hopefully you can utilize that. But I am sorry that maybe I'm not able to speak to the exact place where you or other young artists might be at, where they're having trouble finishing or they're feeling this overwhelming anxiety. I mentioned earlier in this video here my struggle with perfectionism. Sometimes that, I think, might slow down certain artists or make them kind of bail on finishing a piece because it's not going perfectly, so they bail. So maybe checking your expectations. Are you trying to be perfect? Are you comparing your artwork to someone else? Is there toxic thinking going on that needs to be kind of flushed out? And I say, focus on having fun. You'll keep on drawing, and if you're keeping on drawing, you stand a better chance at getting better in the evolution of your art. You'll hopefully evolve towards getting better. Even if it's just a little bit better, that's still better than it was the drawing before. So focus on having fun, enjoy the moment where it's at, and as your skills continue to progress and you keep leveling up bit by bit by bit, baby steps, that's okay. It's all gonna build to where you get to the point of, hey, I feel pretty good about what I can do. Still encounter challenges, but I know what I've done in the past. I know I can handle this challenge. And even if I feel I can't, I'll have faith that I will. Just keep at it and see what you learned by going through that challenge to get to that end product and move on to the next one. So this is, again, one of those wibbly wobbly answers. I hope I kind of addressed what you were asking about, and it hopefully gives you a little bit of hope, a little bit of encouragement, and maybe a little bit of maybe a tool or two that you can apply to your illustrations to kind of push past whatever you might be feeling, to get to a place where you can find more hope and joy in your illustration, and seeing a project through without as much concern or anxiety or heaviness. So that's my encouragement and hope to you and to all you young artists that might be struggling in that way. Know that you're not alone. Any negative feeling you might be feeling, you're not alone. We all feel it, whether as amateur artists, as pro artists, when we were starting out, or where we are nowadays. It's all a part of, kind of in a way, the human experience, and allowing ourselves to be human in those moments, feel these negative feelings, but also knowing we can sometimes change the way we think about something, even if it's a challenge, even if it doesn't work out perfectly. That's okay. We can kind of keep practicing it. Just try a little bit, a baby step each time, each day, and can help build up that bucket of good experiences. Hopefully it starts to outweigh the bad or unpleasant experiences. Again, wibbly wobbly answer. I hope I brought a little bit of encouragement to you there at the very least. But that's why I always say, keep on drawing, keep having fun. Because if we're having fun, then we're going to want to keep drawing. And if we're still drawing, stand a better chance of leveling up, as I said before. So, gosh, I wish I had a clear answer just to give you to that strikes directly to the thing that you're talking about from the place you're at. I can only speak from the places I have been, from my experience. But hopefully, as you go on your art journey, you'll be able to, and as you start to overcome your challenges, you'll be able to share that from the places where you've been and be an encouragement to another generation of artists as you continue to go forward. So yeah, again, wibbly wobbly, but thanks for your grace, everybody. I appreciate y'all letting me do my best to try to answer as best I can. Okay, and as I was giving that answer, you saw I was starting to create these fades here in the inside of her cape. I have these big black chunky areas, and then there's these kind of places where light is kind of coming through and hitting. So I'm using my French curve, and I'm starting with thin lines going to thick lines. So I'm giving light pressure to heavier pressure as I move towards the darker part of her cape, where there's more concentrated shadow. And I just move the French curve just a little bit each time as I make each line, so it creates this nice clean fade, as you've seen me do here. And I got one more section here. I'm going to flip this around. I'm going to do one more of these where I'm creating that fade. So I can go thick to thin or thin to thick. All depends on what's the easiest way for me to create that fade shape, so that it's nice and consistent. And it's just moving that French curve just by a micro space to create enough space in between each line, that as I create the thick to thin, that thick parts, they all kind of merge together to create this nice pretty gradation. And that takes a lot of practice. So get a French curve and then just kind of practice making those lines. An amount of pressure, a key point is the amount of pressure you put on the nib of the pen. So like I said, if it's light, if you're pressing down lightly, it'll be a thin line, and then if you bear down harder, you're going to get a thicker line. Or you can start by putting a lot of pressure down, thicker line, and then as you go, you apply consistent less and less pressure to get a nice consistent fade there. It's really about pressure, and it takes a lot of practice. Don't get me wrong here. It takes a lot of practice. I was not able to do those fades when I first started off. I had to do it again and again and again and again. It's a good inking exercise if you need that. Try making those fades consistently across the board. I have an inking exercise video here on my YouTube channel. Check that out. I kind of addressed that type of fade in an inking exercise. So now it's time to ink some backgrounds. It's time to ink Krakoa. A lot of rocks and grass and bushes and shrubs and tree bark coming our way now. A lot of fun, different textures. And I love to draw textures. Blades of grass, concentrating the grass, conveying shadow, again, thinking about depth, thinking about shape, creating. Now with Krakoa, we're going to have its face sticking, kind of bubbling up through the ground towards us. So we'll have his these rock-type teeth, and we'll have kind of a gaping maw of his inner part of his mouth, which will have another one of those fades, one of those French curve fades coming up here in a little bit, and then his eyes and the rocks that craggle around it, and some bulbous flowers and things like that. So we're really going to play with a lot of textures here. You can just watch me draw these textures here, and I might speak to some of the textures as we go while I answer some more questions. All right, so we have a question here by Theo_Bednar. How did you learn? Are you self-taught? I'm assuming you meant how did I learn to draw, or how did I learn my art? I am self-taught, but I also went to art school. I've done both, and I continue to teach myself stuff. So I started just drawing for fun as a kid, kind of studying comics, trying to figure. As far as comics goes, I am mostly self-taught. I did take art as an elective in junior high and my junior and senior year of high school, both semesters of my junior and senior year of high school, which I loved getting to do that. So I did have some art instruction in those classes. None of it was about comic book art. I thought I could break into comics on sheer talent alone. And after about a year and a half of trying that, I realized, I've got a long way to go still. And teaching myself, especially here in a time where it was the late 80s, early 90s, so the internet wasn't public. We didn't have something like YouTube where I could see something like this. I didn't really have a lot of resources at the time that I could teach myself with, that I needed to get to that level to break into the comic book industry as soon as I wanted. So I decided to enroll at the Art Institute of Dallas. I studied commercial art and graphic design. They taught nothing about comic books whatsoever. Nothing, absolutely zero at that time. They didn't even have an animation course, which they later developed after I graduated. So, which I probably would have taken because it would have lent itself to comics more at that time, but that was not a possibility. So commercial art and graphic design gave me classes like life drawing and design, color theory, perspective, all these sorts of classes that I could utilize this information and apply it to the craft that I was teaching myself, which was how to be a comic book visual storyteller, how to draw comics and draw comic book pages. That pretty much, I would say, 90% self-taught. Anything I did learn from another place was maybe those Stan Lee Comic Book Greats videos, which you can find here on YouTube, which featured Rob Liefeld, Todd McFarlane, Jim Lee, Will Spertasio, John Romita Jr. Those videos kind of helped me back in the early 90s. That was the closest thing I had to a YouTube art video. And then working with editors and art directors once I started breaking into comics kind of helped me learn some things that kind of filled in the gaps of the stuff I could no longer really teach myself. But now I was working in the industry and learning as I go. And I still continue to teach myself how to do things now, like working with drawing digitally on a tablet. I had to teach myself how to do that by watching some YouTube videos and just experimenting with it. So I'm a big proponent of do whatever you got to do to get better. Teach yourself. We'll always be teaching ourselves. There's always something new to learn. But for some of us, art school can be a great resource because not only did it help me get better with my art, because it helped me get better faster. It was a 2-year program. 1 year after graduating, I got hired by Rob Liefeld to come work at his studio, and that started my full-time career in comics. So art school really paid off for me. But one thing that I really learned from that I just kind of realized here this past year was working on those projects in art school. Every class had its own project that was due at the end of the quarter. So that was 5 classes every quarter. So I had 5 projects due at the end of 11 weeks. It helped me learn how to judge and manage my time to get the work done and meet that end of the class deadline, or that end of the 11-week class deadline. And I did that. There were 4 11-week quarters every year. So that was a really great benefit to me. That's something I learned that I didn't realize I was learning, was how to manage my time and utilize the skills I have and time management to get a project done on time, because that's a huge, huge part of drawing comic books, because these books have to come out on time. So you have to be able to meet deadlines, and school kind of in a great way taught me that. So yeah, I am both traditionally taught by going to art school, but then also self-taught. And I continued to teach myself how to do things like how to use Copic markers. I pretty much taught myself how to utilize those by trial and error. And we'll see that in the Copic video for this illustration, which should post tomorrow. So that helped me get better just by trial and error. It's like I utilized the Copic markers the way I could figure out by just kind of traditionally laying down color. And then as I started to learn how the colors blended by just kind of experimenting with them, I started to learn new things. I started to discover new techniques and started to develop my style of Copic marker illustration. So yeah, all this to say, yeah, I'm both. I'm both classically trained as well as self-taught. And I'd probably say I'm more self-taught than anything because I'm learning all throughout the course of my life. So I'd probably say I have a lot more years of self-taught over the 2 years of art that I was able to take in high school, and then the 2-year art program I did at the Art Institute, which I guess would be a total of 4 years of formal training, I should say. Not classical training, formal training, I guess, formal schooling. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question. Again, I went wibbly wobbly. So as you can see, as I'm inking all this foliage, like the bushes and then flowers here, I'm thinking of, again, shape, light, form, and utilizing this or conveying this with line. So I'm thinking of the shape of the bush, or like the shape of this flower I'm drawing, this weird otherworldly flower. I'm thinking of the shape, and then how would I render that? How do I create the shape of this bush and give it a form and a texture? I'm going to think of the leafy texture of it. All the different leaves can have different textures, so utilize photo reference of foliage. Look at it and try drawing different types of leaves, different types of petals to flowers, different types of bark, because there are different types of trees that have different types of bark. An oak tree is different from a pine tree, which is different from a dogwood tree. You're going to have different types of bark to render that specific tree. Different types of flowers have different types of petals. A rose is different from a daisy, which is different from a sunflower. So I'm going to think about these things and the shape that they are. I'm going to concentrate lines to create a bit more sense of a shadow. As we, like at the bottom of a bush, I'm going to have more concentrated leaves, but then they're going to kind of break up as I move towards the top part of the bush where more light is hitting it to leave it more open for color and highlight. So I'm going to think these things like I do think about with drawing a figure. I'm going to utilize almost very similar ideas with the foliage. Now, someone was asking about how to draw consistent panel borders. I'm doing that right now. I just lined up my board on the T-square. Now I move my T-square up to the line I need to ink, and then I'm just going to bring this my micron across the page to all the spots where the border falls behind the lightning bolt and sword, all the way up to the top, because I'm going to need to draw the rest of Krakoa inside of this panel border framing element. Turn the T-square. Now the T-square connects to the side of my drafting table, which keeps everything either parallel or perpendicular, all 90-degree angles. So I line up the page. It sets on top of the ridge of the T-square. Once that's set, I can move the T-square up to that line I need to draw. Oops, it kind of got a little off, but fortunately my pencil line's still straight, so I can just line it up to that pencil line and then fill in the rest of that border, which runs behind Storm. So just a little bit of these lines here and there. At the bottom and at the top is the here and the there. And then just put my T-square back at the top of my desk, and there I have a nice, clean, right-angled border to my panel. And now I can continue with rendering Krakoa inside the panel border. It's all going to be, the rest of him is going to be framed inside of this panel border. So here is, this is really fun. Krakoa often has these red eyes. So I'm working on the red eyes, and there's like all this rock texture around it. So I'm gonna kind of give this craggly texture around the eye, and there'll be like dirt and rock and then grass kind of surrounding it in a brow sort of shape and fashion. That's kind of the mentality I'm going with there. I really enjoyed how Chris Bachalo drew Krakoa in the Wolverine and the X-Men series he did, where Krakoa really kind of became a regular fixture in the X-Men comics, where he became an ally to the X-Men when he kind of merged with the grounds where the X-Men mansion resided on there in Westchester County. So part of it is a little influenced by what I saw Chris Bachalo do, and then I'm kind of giving it the Todd Nauck flavor, kind of letting it be the way I kind of make my shapes. But definitely have inspired by what Chris Bachalo had done. But I didn't want to draw it exactly the way he did. I wanted it to be a Todd Nauck flavor. All right, we have a question here from Cosplay Media. What character do you get excited to draw when they're requested for a commission, or most obscure? That kind of taps into which characters do I like to draw most, which is a question I answered earlier, and that usually that's Spider-Man or X-Men type characters. But I care about so many characters. I love getting to draw a character that I really care about, whether it be Spider-Man, Kitty Pryde, The Flash, or Booster Gold. You know, I'm going to enjoy those moments. But I also do like getting the really obscure requests. And lately here, I've gotten some really obscure requests. One being the second Miss Marvel, the lesser known Miss Marvel, Sharon Ventura from the 1980s, who later became the She-Thing and joined the Fantastic Four. She was friends with the Thing when the Thing was a wrestler. She kind of met him on the wrestling circuit and became, she was a superhero and joined the Fantastic Four as the second Miss Marvel after, this is well after Rogue had absorbed Carol Danvers' powers and personality. From the early 80s, so there really wasn't a Miss Marvel on the scene. So this gal named Sharon Ventura is like, whoa, I remember reading her when I was a kid in the comics in the 1980s, but man, we haven't seen her in like forever. What is up with her? But it would be fun to draw her because one, she's obscure, and two, she's a character that's kind of from my childhood. Another great obscure request that taps into a deep fandom for me, Cypher and Warlock from the New Mutants. They kind of hybridized. They'd often kind of merge and become Douglock. And if you've read New Mutants, classic New Mutants, you know what I'm referring to. And that one got a lot of traction here on social media. A lot of people responded to it because Warlock is such an interesting character. The two of them were best friends in New Mutants of the 1980s. So there was a real kind of heart connection there for me because they were one of my favorite comic book duos. One of my first favorite comic book duos, kind of best friend duos. Before I even became a fan of Blue Beetle and Booster Gold, it was Cypher and Warlock. So that was a really fun deep cut for me that got a lot of great response here on social media. Got a lot of likes and a lot of comments on that one illustration. Because it was such a unique one and one you don't often see, and then just the texture of Warlock alone. Someday I should do a Warlock YouTube video here because drawing that texture is a real interesting, fun, and fun challenge. So yeah, getting to draw characters that I really care about, and also some deep cut type characters can be a real fun moment. But then also drawing really popular characters that I don't often get to draw, like an Iron Man or a Scarlet Witch or Wonder Woman. Those can be a lot of fun too, just because I love superheroes. I love superheroes, and I'm a fan of most every superhero to one degree or another. Maybe Spider-Man's one of my all-time favorites, but that doesn't mean I don't like Hawkeye. It's like Flash might be one of my favorites at DC or Booster Gold, but that doesn't mean that I'm not a big fan of Superman or Supergirl or Nightwing. So there's all these varying levels of fandom for these characters for me. All right, so I have this tree running up this one side here of the panel, and this is where I get to play with that bark texture, and I love drawing tree bark. It's just so much fun to really concentrate these lines, give them that kind of jiggity, jaggedy kind of texture, really rough-hewn sort of texture. So I really enjoy drawing trees and tree bark and different types of tree bark. And then when you have a character like Krakoa, it can be almost otherworldly. I mean, the way I see Krakoa is Krakoa has flora and fauna of foliage and rocks and trees that we might see in our everyday world, but I also imagine there are plants, well, I guess it's already been established, there are plants on Krakoa that are not common to the rest of the world because the X-Men have been able to create life-saving medicines from these plants and teleportational portals from certain plants. So there are otherworldly plants that exist on Krakoa. This is established in the the X-Men comics now, if it hadn't already been so. But that's something to think of. I can kind of play with taking real life foliage and then just kind of getting creative with it, creating phosphorus sort of bulbs on the tree bark, or on vines or things like that. You can make it look otherworldly. You can make it look weird, and weird textures, and what might light up, what might be phosphorus, what might have a glow to it, what might be slimy, or what might be have a unexpected texture to it, maybe to the leaf or to the rock or something like that. So you can create these weird shapes and textures and really play with that and get creative, as well as draw things that are recognizable, or strictly recognizable as a plant or rock we might see in our everyday life. All right, we have another question here from Theo_Bednar. If you had to relate to a superhero, who would you relate to? I would probably say when I was younger, I thought I related most to Peter Parker, Spider-Man. We, had a hard time, we had to keep a job, juggle school, failing dating life. So that one's who I felt like I related to the most at that time, maybe through my teens and into my early 20s. But now here, after some time has passed, I think I probably relate more to Nightcrawler from the X-Men. We are both of German descent. Nauck is a German name. It's actually pronounced Nauck in Germany, from what I understand. But in the States, we say Nauck, or at least in my family, we say Nauck. Let's see. We both have kind of slender faces, slender facial features. So kind of physically, I think we kind of share some similar traits. I do have 5 fingers and 5 toes, where he has 3 fingers, 3 toes. Now I have 5 fingers, 5 toes on each hand and foot. Total of 20 digits altogether. He has a total of 3 times 4, 12. So that's a difference there. He has a prehensile tail. I do not have a tail. But we're also men of faith. We are both believers in God and Jesus. So I can really relate to that as a person of faith, that there's a character that is a man of faith as well. So that's something that I think I really strongly relate to with Nightcrawler and appreciate. All right, so now I'm roughing in. I just noticed as I worked on the inks here that I have some room to kind of really create some dense foliage even further into the background. So I'm putting some more kind of scraggledy, for lack of a better word, I'm going to make up these weird words here, for kind of tree branches kind of in the furthest background. A lot of just kind of dark branches to contrast against the lighter open Storm's hair and the lightning bolt. So just some shadowed tree branches in the far background. Keeping them thin. I don't want them to overpower. Keeping in mind the lines I have here in the foreground and how I can render this out in the background. Some real nice tree bark, sort of dense tree bark texture in the furthest background there. I think I'm just going to do one tree, if I remember correctly, because I don't want it to become so dense that it muddies. So if I've ever unsure, that's the nice thing about roughing something in with a pencil. You can kind of get a feel for, is this the right amount of detail? If you put in too much, you can just erase some of those pencil lines out. So I felt that this one tree would be just enough. And as we fill up the last little bit of this background here, kind of putting some of the bark in between some of the lightning bolt arcs that are kind of coalescing around her sword, kind of fading down here to the ground and towards the last sort of maybe grass and bushes here. All right, here's a question that in regards to inking, which kind of plays into what I'm doing now. Marks by J asked, what is the struggle for you to learn digital inking? With digital inking has definitely been a challenge because I'm not used to stylus on tablet. I'm used to what I'm doing right here, pen on artboard. I can feel the drag and the resistance of pen pulling across the artboard. I'm used to that. I've been doing it for most of my life, much of my life. But getting used to inking is slick stylus on tablet. It's almost like walking out onto ice. It's like I've been walking on ground all the time, and I can feel the friction of foot on ground. But if I step onto ice, it's slick. I don't have that control that I'm used to. So that's been the greatest thing I've been having to learn here with digital inking. I'm still working on it, still getting a feel for it. It's a lot of fun, but it's still a lot to learn, and getting used to techniques. And I'm also trying to learn on how to manipulate the pen settings to get it to what I need. So there's still a lot there I have to research and learn and grow and evolve. But I gotta tell you this, my digital inking is better than when I first started out. When I first started out, I hated it, almost gave up on it, but I realized, no, I can't give up. I gotta push through, I gotta play through the pain, I gotta face this challenge and keep working at it so it becomes second nature. This is what I gotta do. It's what I advise. I gotta do it myself. So I kept at it, kept working at it to where it started to get to a point where it started to feel more comfortable. There's still a lot more for me to learn, but at least I'm seeing a progression, and I hope to continue to learn and do more. And speaking of inking tricks, this is what the inside of Krakoa's mouth. Remember I said I was going to do another one of those French curve fades? Well, this is it. It's time for a French curve fade. So I got the angle of the French curve I want to use. And I'm starting from the dark part, from the upper shadow of the inside of his mouth, and pulling down. So I'm pushing down. I'm applying more pressure when I start the line, then I ease up as I move towards the ground. So you can see a dark thick line to a thinner line. So it's creating this gradation. I'm going to do this all the way across his mouth, again and again and again, just moving the French curve just by a slight fraction, just enough of a width of one pen stroke here. How wide that pen nib is, that's about as far as I'm moving it. So I can create this nice dark fade that goes to light. And when we come in with the Copic colors in the next video, you're really going to see how that kind of translates the dark to light with color. But I want to create that here with the line art because I think it looks really cool. And it's also a really fun sort of Zen sort of thing to do. It's just move the French curve, draw the line. 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 I just keep doing that, and it's almost like you kind of get into this rhythm, especially after you've practiced it a while and you develop that confidence. It can be a really fun kind of Zen sort of moment where you just kind of like you become one with the tools and just kind of I don't know. I just really enjoy it. Okay, just adding a little more texture here to the rock, some little detail lines. Kind of give the rock more of a gritty texture. For his teeth, he's got like these rock teeth, and then kind of a different color rock and dirt for the kind of almost brow or face of him. Can add some more detail to the leaves, some folds or crinkles or almost like veins. Just adding just a little more details all throughout here, just a little bit. Kind of a little more concentrated lines further away from the light source just to create kind of a little bit of a depth. Gonna add another ridge of black here just to kind of really finish off this shape. I felt like it needed a little more of a black shape here, so I'm creating another little black chunk. Actually, a couple of little black chunks fading from black to the light area. That will be the kind of open gray area from the light source coming from above. So now I take my Mars plastic eraser here, and I just do a light erasing here. I could also use my kneaded art gum eraser, but since I had a lot of concentrated graphite lines here, I wanted to use a stronger eraser here. So I'm using the Mars plastic eraser instead. Not bearing down too hard because I don't want the artwork to lighten up too much. So you got to be very cautious when erasing. Take it slow. Don't rush the erasing. Oh, and I forgot I needed to add the dark trim to her sword, much like how Magic has in her current snowboard-sized sword. She has those angled black trim. I wanted to reflect that in this. So it's kind of like a hybrid between Magic's two swords, her original slender sword and then her current wide sword. I wanted it to kind of reflect both of those elements. Slender sword, because as I said before, I think it fits with Storm's character. It's a little more streamlined. But then I wanted it to have some aspects of the heavy blacks in there, especially considering Storm's costume is heavy black. So I wanted that to be kind of a consistent theme. Just utilizing my French curve to get some nice curved lines. I could do it freehand if I wanted, but I chose to use the French curve in this case. So it's really, really tight. And get back to erasing and get rid of all the rest of these pencil lines. Just go through here and just carefully erase. Now with a kneaded art gum eraser, it's a good one too. You don't end up with eraser dust with a kneaded art gum eraser. And sometimes I use that for, well, any number of different reasons, but chose not to use that one here. I think because, like I said, I had so many pencil lines, a lot of graphite on here, and so I wanted this plastic eraser to really make sure I got rid of such a heavy concentration of line. And I like to erase before I fill in the blacks because I have noticed that if I spot the blacks with the Pentel Pocket Brush Pen, which is coming up soon, and then I go to erase, for some reason the ink from the Pentel Pocket Brush Pen, I don't know how it reacts with the paper, but if I erase over that, it will tear. It's happened so consistently. If I spot a big black with the Pentel Pocket Brush Pen and then erase over it, it will 9 times out of 10 tear the paper. And so lesson learned. I'm going to erase first and then fill in the blacks, and it actually makes it a lot easier. You don't have less fear of the line works or the ink smudging. If there's a section that I filled in black that isn't quite dry and I go to erase, I can just, with the eraser, just smudge that wet ink into an area that should not have ink at all, and you have that big ugly smudge, and then it's like, oh, do I have to start over? Can I hide it? It's just not fun. So now that we've got it inked and I've got all the eraser dust, make sure you brush that eraser dust away, as I've done there, because you don't want to accidentally ink over eraser dust, because then that could glob things up. Now we go in and we fill in all these black areas that I put the little X in, where I spot that black. I can go in and now fill in that area with black brush pen here. And I like using the brush pen because I can hit these black areas I need to fill in much faster and easier than trying to fill it in with a pen. All right, we're getting near the end of the video, but we still have some time here. So let's try another question or two. So Ian Souza, hopefully I pronounced that correctly. How to conquer the fear of the blank page at every stage of development. Fear of the blank page, I've heard of that. I don't know if I really struggle with that. I think my ignorance about fear of the blank page has helped me avoid the fear of the blank page. For me, it's when I go into an illustration, I'm thinking about the character, who I know the character to be, or if I don't know the character that well, how can I research or reference that character? Oftentimes, maybe go read a story of that character or look up their Wikipedia page and read about them. Try to get into the head of that character, get into the mode or mindset of that character. Consider, where is the character, what's going on, and let the story kind of play out in my head, and then I can pause that story. Do some quick rough sketches to start to get a feel for that character. or what pose I could put that character in, or how to compose that image, that cover. Sometimes it starts off, it's like it's so wide open, but it kind of ties back to that anxiety of I got to get all 20 pages done. So I'm thinking about that, getting to page 20, as opposed to focusing on drawing page 1, then focusing on drawing page 2. So when it comes to the blank page, my thought is, okay, let's start sketching things out. Let's start getting these characters moving. All right, what kind of pose do I want to put them in? Are they jumping? Are they running? Are they flying? Are they standing? Are they crouching? And where would they be doing this action at? And are there other characters around? Are there civilians around? What are they on the top of a building, or are they underground? It could be anywhere. So it all depends on what it is I need to draw. And then, and sometimes if I just can't think of something, I'll work on something else on the side and let that gel. Oftentimes when I have to do a cover or draw a story, I like to have that cover in mind, but not start on it till the next day if I have that luxury of deadline, because it allows my brain to start thinking about it in the background. That program is running in the background while I'm working on something else, while I'm eating dinner, while I'm watching an episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. That is running in the back of my mind, because I never know what I might see, what I might think of along the way before I start to work on it. So that kind of can kind of prepare me for it. Because if I jump in cold, sometimes it's a little harder to get there. I'm not warmed up. But if I'm thinking about it, by that next day, I've put so much thought into it that I now have sparked at least a couple of ideas, if not more, that I can then start to play with and mix and match, and allowing myself that freedom to mix and match. And it's got to start off with that kind of rough, sketchy stage, allowing myself that freedom to let things change and edit as I go. So just starting to put down lines, start to create a shape, start to create a pose, and then what does that morph into next? Oh, wait, I got a brand new idea. Wait, instead of that, I'm gonna do this. Oh, I really like this pose, but I need to move this over here. That's why I like to sketch digitally, because if I wanna change the size, shape, or placement of something, all I have to do is select it, drag it over, instead of erase it working traditionally, where I would have to erase it and then redraw it and hope I can recapture all that magic. So that's a real huge benefit of drawing digitally. If I drew the Spider-Man in one place, but I need to slide him over, make him a little bit larger, oh, it's so easy. Just select, boom, and then I can keep rolling with that idea I have, and it doesn't really slow down the process hardly at all, because it just took me seconds to readjust and resize that to where I want it to be, and now I can work on the next element of the illustration. So that's kind of how I handle something similar to the fear of the blank page. I just have never really known it as that. I'm sure I've been overwhelmed or stumped or had kind of an artist block on how to approach that, but I found that, you know, sometimes, especially if I'm doing it for work, the deadline has to get met. You kind of gotta just go for it. You just got to get it done. And also learning that sometimes what my expectation of is for this art isn't necessarily going to translate to the viewer or to the editor or the rest of the creative team. So I can't carry that with me. It's like whatever I think this is going to be, I'm getting into the wibbly wobbly stage again. Let me tell you a little story here. I think I've told it before, I'll tell it again. There was a time I was working on a comic and I just had such frustration with the page. I didn't think I was translating the panel the way I wanted it to be. I got the job done, I got the page done because the deadline, the pages had to get out, you know, to the editor by a certain time. So I got it done, and it was succinct, and it was clear, and it was, you know, crafted to the best of my ability and as professionally as possible. But I had a different vision for it that I really wished I had achieved. I think I had this expectation that I wasn't achieving, so I was a little disappointed in myself, but I couldn't sit there and spend days working on it. It had to get done, and it met the need, and I sent it on. The next day I get a call from my editor saying, oh, got your latest pages, look fantastic, this one panel with the this, that, and the other, love it, my favorite page in the whole book. And it's like, that was the one I struggled with the most, but my editor loved it. And it was in that moment I learned, whatever I perceive my art being, my editor and others are going to could very well perceive it differently. He loves something that I didn't know if I loved or not. I probably wasn't really loving it at the time. But then when I heard my editor explain what he liked about it, I saw, oh, I achieved what needed to be done. And obviously I did it in a way that really excited my editor for him to rave about that one page. So I kind of try to go in with that mindset. That's where I kind of got a little hung up there, is that whatever I might think about this, we're working as a team. And if I'm off course, my editor is there to kind of kick me back into play, to give me the guidelines of saying, this isn't quite working, could you try this? That's an editor's job. So allowing them that room to come in and speak into the art if they feel necessary. It's necessary. Because I might come up with something that maybe I feel insecure about, but the editor could rave about it. And then that kind of brings back that security. It's like, oh, wow, okay, I'm thinking about this differently now. Let's keep rocking. So, yeah, again, I wish I had the perfect answer for this fear of the blank page, but I can only, like I said in the previous questions, I can only speak from my experience, and I hope this brings you some encouragement and maybe some different ideas of how to approach that sort of thing. But the most important thing, I'll say it again, keep having fun. Keep having fun. No matter if you're in the middle of the challenge, we can still find a way to have fun. That's what I try to focus on. It's like, what can I enjoy in this time? If I have to draw a cow, which you longtime viewers know, that's the bane of my existence, having to draw a cow. We say jokingly now. It's more become an in-joke than anything else. When I was working on the Invincible Universe series and the writer wrote in a cow, I complained about it. And after doing all I could to draw a cow as best as I could, going to Michael's craft stores and buying a little PVC model of a cow, looking at photos of cows on Google image searches, and trying to do everything I needed to do to craft the cow as best I could. Turned in the pages, and the editor and the writer said, Todd, why are you complaining about drawing cows? These cows look great. And it's like, yeah, see, there I go. You know, you just kind of, we can be our own worst critic and we can encounter a challenge, but if we press through, we will have gotten through it and hopefully learned something from it and have leveled up. So the next time fortunately I have not had to draw a cow since then, but I never know when the day might come where I'll have to draw a cow. But if I do, I'm ready for it, because I did it once before in issue 5 of the Invincible Universe. And I think that was the issue, or was it Guarding the Globe? It was all those same characters, those Invincible spin-off characters. That was like 2013 that I was working on that series. So 2012 or 13. So a bit of time ago. I've drawn a lot of comics since then, so it's hard to remember the details of every single page panel of every single comic I've drawn. So again, wibbly wobbly answer. Hopefully this helps out. I'm going to move on to the next question. All right, we'll take one more question here, and I have two questions that are quite similar. Sco.art asks, do you have any original story and character that you want to make your own comic to tell us about? And then Sturdavan Nathan asked, do you have any creator-owned comic characters or any that you thought of making? So to both of you, I can say yes. I have a character, I have this whole world that I've created, the Wild Guard comic book universe. They were mini comics I did when I was in art school that Rob Liefeld discovered and hired me off of. Long story there, but that's the kind of Cliff Note version. So that's how I broke in, was Rob seeing my homemade mini comics of my creator-owned characters, Wild Guard, which is a reality TV superhero team. And I made this comic back in the 1990s, when really the only reality TV shows of any note were Cops and MTV's The Real World. And I just kind of blended the two and made it about superheroes. And this was before Survivor and American Idol and all that, which I'm a big fan of the show Survivor and Amazing Race, things like that. Not every reality TV show, but the competition ones on CBS are my favorite. Big Brother and the like. So I did end up bringing Wild Guard to Image after I did my Young Justice series at DC Comics. So I wrapped that up. I did Wild Guard as a 12-issue series at Image Comics. I hope to do more with those characters. Some people have asked here in the Instagram questions, will I be doing more Wild Guard? I hope to. I'm working on a one-shot story on the side whenever I have the free time. I haven't had pretty much free time prior. I hope to find some free time here during this season amidst my live streams and commissions to work on that Wild Guard story. So I hope to do more of Wild Guard. Now, I also have created a character. He's more of a comic strip character. He has an account on Instagram and Twitter. His name is Jack-O-Lantern. He's a pumpkin-headed ghoul, and it's just his misadventures through life. They are single-page comic strips. I've done about 7, I believe. I have And I'm working on some new ones that I hope to get going. I want to try to do a bunch of those and maybe someday collect them into a volume. But if you look up XMenMonday, Jacko, like you spell Jack-O, Jacko is his first name. Manturn, M-A-N-T-U-R-N. If you look him up on Instagram, it's Jacko_Manturn. You can read about his adventures on Instagram. So yeah, definitely want to do more with my creator-owned stuff because it's a lot of fun to kind of create your own world, build your own world, create your own characters, and tell their stories because you have so much creative freedom with that. It's truly, truly a lot of fun. All right, so we're just finishing off some of the details here on the foot, spotting the blacks here, kind of fixing this shape here, make it, put it all together, and wrap up this illustration. Oh my gosh, this has been so much fun to pencil and ink. I know this has been a long video. I appreciate everyone hanging out here with me. If you like this video, please leave me a thumbs up. If you just discovered my channel, please feel free to subscribe. Just go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Then you can tap that bell and set your notifications to alert you anytime I schedule an art live stream or upload a new art video. You won't want to miss the upload of the color video, which will be a second video here that should be out tomorrow. There'll be a link to this, the Adventures in Poor Taste interview that I did where this illustration spawned from. So you can click on that link below. So you can go and read my interview about the X-Men for XMenMonday at AIPT.com. So I think it's AIPT.com. It's the AIPT Adventures in Poor Taste website. A lot of geek news and reviews. And they do XMenMonday every Monday, and that's how this all came about, was being interviewed for XMenMonday here this week. So the link to that article is in the video description below, as well as all my social media. So if you're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, go give me a follow over there, and you can see this illustration as well as a bunch of my other art. All right, so here we can take a look at the scan of the rough pencil sketch art. Pretty rough. And then here is a scan of the finished inked art. The color video is tomorrow, and we're going to do a bunch of Copic colors, and that'll be a lot of fun. And here are a couple of other videos you can check out if you're still in the mood for some more Todd Nauck art. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks for hanging out, and hope you had a good time. Keep on drawing, keep having fun. I'm Todd Nauck. Take care.